Texas. We evaluated the Region 7 Office Rockdale of Texas Animal Health Commission with respect to reliability, integrity of information, compliance with rules, policies, procedures, laws, and regulations, safeguarding of assets, efficiency and effectiveness of operating procedures, and that was as of September 27, 2012. The result of our test disclosed generally the systems are functioning adequately and are reliable. We did observe some opportunities for improvement. We did note that fixed asset accountability may be enhanced by having the current reconciliation of fixed asset assigned to Region 7 and the Texas Animal Health Headquarters. In essence, what we noted was that the region was not consistent in reconciling the fixed asset assigned to them with the headquarters, just to make sure that the numbers agree. We did note some instances whereby serial numbers and inventory numbers basically didn't match, but we didn't notice anything missing. If you go on page 4 of the report, we have more detailed issues, recommendations, and the management response. Our first objective was to determine reliability and integrity of information. We did notice that information is entered into the GDB system using different input forms. Inspector reports agree with supporting documentation. We did select a sample of permits issued, and we tested with no discrepancies noted. There is a system in place to ensure that activities of the staff comply with policies, procedures, laws, and regulations. There is also adequate documentation supporting the petty cash expenditures. Petty cash was properly authorized. The region had a petty cash system, and that is fully authorized in terms of all expenditures. Again, the only issue we noted was the discrepancies between the fixed assets shown by the central office or the headquarters and Region 7. Other than that, everything was functioning as intended. And that's as of September 27th, 2012, when we actually did the work. Now I'll be more than happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the audit of Region 7 office as discussed today.
I'll second it. Any other discussion? It's been moved and seconded to approve the audit of Region 7 office as discussed today. Any further discussion? If not, all supporting the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Okay. Next, we need to move into the audit of performance measures reporting. That's tab number 4.
Commissioners, we have conducted internal audits of reported performance measures at the Texas Animal Health Commission for fiscal year ended 2012. Specifically, our internal audit was limited to the following measures. Outcome measure, which is percent change in the number of fever tick infested premises from 2007 level. The next was output measure, number of livestock shipments inspected. Next was output measure, number of specimens processed through the state federal cooperative laboratory system. And the last but not the least was output measure, the number of compliance actions completed. We did use the State Auditor's Office guide, the performance measures 2012 to do this. And there are 4 categories in terms of testing the performance measures. One is certified. That is, we look at the measure and we look at the controls in place and we're able to trace information to supporting documentation. And we're basically happy with the system that's in place, then that would be certified. The next one would be certified with certification. which is the information was entered into the ABES system correctly. The supporting documentation might not be there. However, the information was entered correctly. So if we are unable to verify the information through the supporting documentation, even if you do have the controls in place within the agency to enter the information into the system, we'll certify it, but with qualification. Inaccurate is when our tests reflect that the information was not entered correctly. And then the next one, not the least, is factors prevent certification. If you have no controls in place, information was not entered at all correctly, then we would say we're unable to do that, which is factors prevent certification. So looking at the 4 measures that we tested, we're happy to report that all the measures were certified because you did have the input controls in place. You did have the processing controls in place. You do have the review controls in place. You have the supporting documentations in place. However, one of them was certified with a qualification, which is the outcome measure % change in the number of fever tick infested premises from the 2007 level. The agency has a system of internal control that is actually functioning. You obtain the information from USDA and you enter that information into the ABES system. However, what we cannot attest to as internal auditor is the controls within the USDA system. So as a result of that, we are certifying it with qualification. Basically saying, you do have the input controls in place, you have the processing controls in place, you have the review controls in place. After you receive the information from the USDA system and enter that information into the ABES system, you do have a system in place. However, we cannot attest as to the accuracy of the information coming from the USDA system. So as a result, we are certifying it with qualification. All our findings, and I'll be more than happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
How often does this test need to be done? Do we do this strategic plan, is this once a year or every?
Oh, you mean on the performance basis?
Yeah, performance basis, is this?
The performance measures were selected based on the audit plan.
Okay.
You don't work on a 5-year cycle.
That's what I was
so
wondering.
Really what it comes up with.
Okay.
Yeah, we do risk assessment on annual basis.
Right.
We select the areas that think should be audited.
Right.
And we'll present that audit plan to the commission, and the commission approves.
Right.
Then we'll do the audit. So every 5 years, I mean, our goal is to have at least each auditable unit audited in the agency.
And I might note, somewhat interested, independently of this, it could be audited by the state auditor's office. And it actually did come up to be audited this year, but this audit had actually just taken place, and so we provided it.
Okay.
But you tend to have both the state auditor look at it about every 5 years, as well as it tends to come up somewhere within that 5 years with him.
Okay.
And that was what we did. We did follow the guide of the state auditor's office to do this. As a matter of fact, I used to work for the state auditor's office. Before I left there, about 15 years ago or so, I was doing performance measures using that guide. So when the question came up, we said, well, we used your guide. Here's a copy of our report. And, that took-
They paid you twice then, correct? 2 audits and double it, that's,
I might
okay.
want to also add that my associate Robert Gonzalez we used to work for the state auditor's office. That's when we met about 25 years ago.
Okay. Any questions or?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the audit of performance measures reporting as discussed today.
Okay, second it. Been moved and seconded to approve the audit performance measures reported as discussed today. Any additional discussion or questions? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Okay, do we have any public comments? Anybody sign up regarding the budget?
No, sir.
Okay, with that,
I move that we adjourn.
okay, I'll second it, so we're done. Thank you all, appreciate it.
Hey, we're waiting on D. As soon as D gets here, we'll get started.
I'll tell you about it. Storm coming, I really might ought to stay here.
Oh.
That's like just one or two.
Say now we go to wedding, I get in 11:30 day call.
Get paid big bucks for that too.
So I was down at Jill's house for an hour and a half, I guess. I get paid $20 a month, $10 a month.
Big, I told you big bucks, didn't I? Good night.
That environment down at the Jill house is, I've had to magistrate about, usually the women most of the time, because sometimes they'll move in and out, we only keep one.
Thank you.
Yeah, that helped. Wow.
Juvenile, just making, the mother was there.
Good morning. Welcome, everybody, to the 386th meeting of the Texas Animal Health Commission. I'd like to start off by welcoming everybody here, and also a note that our thoughts and prayers are with the families and people in Oklahoma, and keep them in your prayers. Also, the devastation, the tornado a week or so ago here in Texas. I think you're going to hear a little bit about our emergency response to that catastrophe there, and just keep those people in your prayers, because they're still looking for children in these schools that were damaged. So with that, we'll start the meeting, and I'll ask for approval of the minutes, or any discussion on the minutes of the 385th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes of the 385th Commission meeting held on January 18, 2013.
It's been moved and seconded we approve the minutes of the 385th meeting. Is there any discussion? None, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Ellis will begin in his report of the Executive Director for Field Activities and Health Programs. Dr. Ellis, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, and welcome guests and staff. You should have in your book a copy of the bullet points of my talk, and it's, I'll go as fast as I can. I think it's one of the most diverse situations we have right now as far as different things I need to update you on. I'll just probably not give any of them due process, but so I don't have to talk an hour up here, I'm going to go pretty quick, and I'll be glad to answer questions now or after the meeting. Agency overview, just want to start off with that, and just let you know, obviously, since the last meeting in January, the legislative session has taken up a lot of our executive management time. Gene and Mary and myself and Dr. Swartz and Carol, truthfully, that's been our focus. It's been one of the busiest, as far as in my career, it's by far the busiest session we've ever had for the diversity of issues and the importance of the issues. And Mary Ludiker is going to give you an update on that. It's worthy of its own topic, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time other than to say, fever tick bills, poultry bills, vet accreditation, animal ID, dairies in El Paso, Class C misdemeanor authority, CERVID issues, budget. Business was good, as they say, and I'm proud of the way the agency was represented, and I think y'all should be too. And I'll let Mary kind of give you an update on that after I get finished. Specifically from the budget, though, I want to mention, the budget it's not passed, obviously, but it looks promising in the legislative arena for us, and we certainly want to thank all our supporters and our stakeholders for any help they had with that. And I want to go on record thanking those folks that spoke up, and for some of y'all, a number of you guys that came down and sat in and showed support and participated, and Chairman and some of the rest of y'all were there when we needed you, and we do appreciate that. With that said, our budget is going to be talked about later on in a separate topic, agenda item, but we've been very frugal these last 2 years with our budget, and we have saved enough money that we're going to begin now to do some things without waiting. We have some equipment purchases we need to make in this fiscal year. There's some rules about purchasing. You can't wait the very last minute to buy things, and so you're going to see some requests for approvals of purchases, and I think that's a reflection of the frugality of the agency for the last 2 years and the actions that we took to save money. We have the money to buy a few things now. We have the money for some merit raises for our employees now, regardless of how the budget ends up. And we had some capital purchases already budgeted in this year that we saved until the last. We weren't sure if we could have reverted the capital purchase money to salaries or whatever if we needed it, but we didn't need that. So we have some budgeted items that we're going to go ahead and start with your approval to purchase, which is basically trucks and computers. That's the only, we don't own capital things like buildings or land, but capital purchases to us are vehicles and computer technology refresh, which was in our budget, and we hope it's in our budget again next time. I think also there's going to be, just mentioned, there will be some discussion later on about raising, with your approval, the minimum threshold that the agency staff can purchase things without commission approval. It will maybe simplify some of the paperwork you guys get, and right now the minimum is $10,000, and anything over $10,000 has to be done with commission approval. And the best I can remember, and I was actually involved, that figure was set in 1999. It went back to when Dr. Beals was still here, and there was some evaluation of agency oversight, and that was just an arbitrary figure that they pulled out. And so the fact with inflation, and hopefully with the fact too that you guys are comfortable with the managerial oversight that's going on, I think there's going to be some discussion for y'all to consider raising that minimum threshold. There's things we need to buy if they cost $11,000 or $15,000. We have to wait a commission meeting, so I'll just throw that out. And I think the chairman can take the lead on that with Larissa when it's time to do that. But, so we'll move right into my topics, just general issues of discussion, and we'll start with the Texas disease traceability issues, the animal ID, so to speak. A lot has gone on since the last commission meeting, and I think it's positive. The cattle industry has met with selected commissioners. We had a meeting on April 5th, and Chairman Morales was here, and Commissioner Locke and Jordan were actively involved. All our cattle stakeholder organizations met, and I think had a very good open discussion about where we're headed in the state of Texas and the relationship of the Animal Health Commission with the cattle industry. And I think, from my mind, the way I can describe it is the model that we're using with our TRIC program, which is a voluntary program where we come together and discuss ideas and come to some common ground and just move forward, is the way it will and should work with animal disease traceability. And basically, to not give it due credit or justice, because there's been a lot of discussion, but basically and others can come up and say what they want or clarify if I misconstrue this, but basically what I took away, and I think what we all took away from that meeting, was that the cattle industry in Texas would like good quality breeding type adult animals to have some form of permanent official ID, and they want to be consistent with the federal rule and allow slaughter cattle to move on a back tag or can move direct from a premise without any ID, and because they are traceable. And so what we'll start to do here is you're going to see today the beginning of the process for the agency to accommodate generally that concept, and there'll be more dialogue with industry folks this summer. The rulemaking process, there's two different parts of the rulemaking process. One will be to undo some of the rules we have now, which are specifically placed in disease chapters like the brucellosis chapter, and eventually create a broader animal disease traceability chapter where it'll make more clarity, be more transparent, make more sense to try and bring some sense to the chaos of the commission rules. Truthfully, the rules of this commission need to be completely overhauled. I've described it before, it's like a telephone pole, and we just keep nailing 2x4s with new things hanging off of it. And the telephone pole is brucellosis, and everything else has just kind of been tapped around it. So that's the challenge of the staff, executive staff moving forward, is to start to begin to fix this. And I think the animal disease traceability rule and the discussion is just the tip of the iceberg. And so what you're going to see today as we move forward is a proposal to remove the permanent official identification requirement for adult cattle, beef cattle, not dairy, from the brucellosis chapter. And at the next meeting, you will see most likely a proposal to redefine the permanent official identification requirements for Texas beef cattle in a new chapter called Animal Disease Traceability. And that chapter has been driven in part by federal rules, in part by the state of Texas' desire to do its own thing, so to speak, but try and be as consistent as possible, in part by some legislation that's not finished, that's still pending in the legislature, that could affect the technical way that the agency goes about creating these chapters. And so there is an animal ID bill there that is not in effect yet, and so the timing is such that we're to show the good faith and show the intent of the commission to work with the cattle industry on basically allowing slaughter cattle to move, adult slaughter beef cattle to move without a permanent official ID if that's so desired. We'll start that process today by proposing for you to vote on removing that from the brucellosis chapter. And because of the complexity of the federal rules, the complexity of the legislation that's not been passed, but we think is going to pass, there's not a proposal today in a new chapter yet. So for the next few months, you're just going to see voluntary compliance. And to be quite honest with you, I see that already. That's the good value of the intent of if the buy-in of an industry to a program. If the industry agrees with that, it happens. If it doesn't agree with it, it doesn't happen, regardless of the good faith efforts of others that want it to happen. And so we're going to fly through the summer with the voluntary compliance request for identification of adult beef cattle, and I haven't seen it stop. I mean, since the agency, as you know, back in March, or maybe it's February, I can't remember, Chairman Morales and I talked and decided just to back off on the ID for adult beef cattle while we work through the issues. Truthfully, I've not seen any change in what's going on out there across the state of Texas, and we're getting good compliance now. I think there's only 2 markets that are not tagging adult beef breeding cattle in the state, and they weren't before, and they're still not, so that's nothing new. But for the rest of the state, I think we're going to reap the benefits of a cooperative program that we've come to some consensus on, and it'll be the commission's role just to help make it happen and work with industry to try and accommodate the needs, the specific little needs that we're going to have. Texas, big state, lots of diversity in it. So that's my take on this. So I think the ADT, I don't know that we need to talk. I'll be glad to answer questions. We've almost talked this to death, but attached to your book, the agenda from the ADT meeting that was held in April, to show you, again, the complexity of the federal rules that are going to drive a lot of rule changes that you're going to see in the next few meetings at the commission level, which may or may not have anything to do with the ear tag, quote unquote, issue. There's just a lot of things, a lot of species involved. And so I attached for your reference the agenda. If you hadn't seen it or want to review it, that was the discussion items when the beef industry met, and also the letter from LMA with their proposal, which the group accepted, and we very much appreciate and look forward to working with sale barn owners in the future on this joint effort to have disease traceability. And I think, Chairman, you want to say something?
Just before, excuse me, before you move on, Dr. Ellis, I just want to make it very clear that we have already had a meeting with stakeholders, and we have seen some really good practical, had good practical dialogue on how this issue can be handled, and this has come straight from the Texas Livestock Marketing Association, and we're really close. I mean, this thing, we're not really far apart. There's some things that they have brought up as an industry to ask our help on how to make it to where it's workable, both on a regulatory standpoint for disease traceability and for the day-to-day operations they have and deal with in their livestock markets on a daily basis. So we are pulling this out of brucellosis, but we're not forgetting about this. And industry's driving this force, and I think that's what makes this agency very unique and workable. I think we've got some solutions that can be brought up as a proposal for the fall meeting. I didn't mean to interrupt, Dr. Ellis, but I think it needs to be said, and there's been a lot of work done on this, and obviously my hat's off to Dr. Ellis for for the work he's done and our staff, and again to industry for what they've done helping us through this process. So we're not that far apart, and we are going to continue to work on this issue.
Yes, I'm, I'll just tell you, I'm completely comfortable that we're going to figure it out, and there's not, it's just a matter of going through the timeframes, and we'll get this proposal to you guys in the next meeting, and listen to the industry in the meantime, and work with them, and solve it. It's not going to be, to me, that difficult to just move forward with the Texas beef industry needs traceability. With that said, there is one piece of the animal disease traceability rule change driven by the federal side that we're going to go ahead and have proposed today because it was discussed on April 5th, and it's necessary for interstate movement right now. And Dr. Varner is obviously going to talk about some of the federal perspectives on the rule that is already in place. But it relates to tagging facilities, and basically the federal rule says animals can cross state line, and I'm generalizing, but animals can, we're not talking about feeder calves and calves, but we're talking, let's just say adults. They can move across state line without an official permanent ID if they go to a place that will tag them when they arrive, or they go to slaughter, or they go to a place that will sell them for slaughter only. So what these are called are tagging facilities. And so at our April 5th meeting, with the discussion with all the cattle groups, industry groups that were there, the general agreement was that even though some markets may not handle out-of-state cattle, that for simplicity's sake, the commission will propose a tagging facility construct or concept or framework that all markets will try and adhere to, just to keep it simple. And possibly some feedlots. If you have feedlots that are feeding adult cattle, they may desire to become a tagging facility. And you may have some private enterprises that are not a market but are affiliated in some way that are going to do this. So basically what you're seeing today is a proposal for the first thing out of the federal rule, which is a draft. It's going to be just a form that basically just some guidelines. They say, well, we're going to be a tagging facility, and because of a tagging facility, we're going to use these tags and keep records for this long, and generally just follow the guidelines that, even though each state may tweak it a little bit, for the most part, the federal tagging facility guidelines are pretty generic and broad enough that it'll work. And so that rule will be proposed. The rest of the impact of the federal rule you'll start to see at the next meeting. And it's, if you look through the handout I gave you, it's very complex. We're going to change definitions through a number of chapters. It affects hogs, sheep, goats, horses, pigs, whatever. Hogs and pigs, I guess, are the same thing, but you get the point. So. I do want to mention one last part of this is that we're continuing to distribute free ear tags. USDA is providing them right now, silver metal tags. They're a short-term solution to helping bridge the gap. Long term, I hope we get to some cheap, economical, speed of commerce solution that's using electronic IDs that can move us into the 21st century. But I want to thank Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, the practicing veterinarians across the state, USDA, and our employees. We're handing out free metal test tags, USDA tags, to anybody that wants them right now. And if USDA were to stop providing those, I would suggest the commission pay for them and continue to do it. They're a nickel each, basically. That's what they cost. It's not that much money. So 1 million tags, that's $50,000. So my intent would be that even if USDA stops, and they will stop at some point, we should continue to provide this free offer until it's obvious that something better's out there, or we want to discourage it because their electronic capabilities are so good that it's time to move on with that. But for now, I do want to thank that. There's going to be a couple of national meetings, and if any of you are interested in going, one in August and one in September. One's a symposium by the National Institute of Animal Agriculture. The other USDA is going to put on, and there's going to be an interaction and interface there between vendors, between market owners, feed yard owners, government officials, software companies, computer companies. The last couple of meetings I've been to, most of my time has been talking to computer guys, believe it or not. The transformation of identification and health certification at the national and state level is intense, and these guys are all jockeying for the best product, and it's taking up a considerable amount of our time at this point here internally. Dr. Schwartz is the lead for our ADT, and he may wish to say some things about that. We're trying to evaluate this, but if any of you are interested, there's 2 national meetings that we will probably take some computer people, believe it or not. When someone's talking to me about computer software, my eyes glaze over. And I wish someone else were there standing beside me next day, talk to this guy, because I don't even know what you're talking about. So if you have an interest in that, let me know, and we'll give you the dates on that. And it's going to be, Texas is the biggest state. We have the most animals. We have the most risk for lots of reasons, and we are looked at as leaders in this, and we're keeping all our options. What I don't want to do is contract with any specific vendor in the short term and then realize 2 years later they've got us held hostage and they can charge whatever we want. So we're going to let the business model play out. So what's that mean? That means we may allow other companies to come in with electronic health certificate things. It's going to mean that we're looking internally at our own model for electronic health certificate. It may mean that we come back in 2 years or 4 years and recommend that paper health certificates be discontinued because they're just unmanageable. And so this is a cutting edge issue that I would encourage, if you guys have an interest, let me know and we'll plug you in, because we need input, and obviously you're talking to our stakeholder partners as well on this. So on the federal side, I've kind of mentioned, you can turn the page on my report, but we're going to have to rewrite our intro chapter. We're creating an ADT Chapter 50. We're going to have to change a number of language and definitions throughout our rules. Since the last meeting, I did go meet, Dr. Varner and I went together and met with the 4 major slaughter plants, and we didn't get to Booker. But other than that, that's the only one we didn't get to, just to talk to them about the impact on federal rules. And I want to thank Dr. Varner for going with me, and we had some really good visits. One of them did come to the cattle meeting on April 5th from LNH, and they have an interesting perspective, and they, like all the rest of the industries, believe in animal disease traceability and just want to come to some common ground on how to manage all the issues there. I was also asked to attend a national meeting in Denver along with NCBA and the feeder industries. In the feeder industry, I want to give them credit. They're looking ahead. The next rule that USDA says they're going to begin to formulate is animal disease traceability for feeder animals. And so the feeder industry of the United States is trying to be proactive and actually come to the table with rules that are acceptable to them in advance, rather than waiting on a bunch of government guys to quack around in their business. And so that was the first meeting, a very interesting group, and I was one of 5 vets who was asked to come up there, and Texas Cattle Feeders was very much a leader of that as well, and I think you can watch that as they're continuing to move forward along with NCBA folks. And TSCRA as well was at that meeting. So that's all I have on animal disease traceability. It's a lot going on. I'm very comfortable that the commission will be able to solve these issues. I don't see any impasse right now that's not negotiable and fixable, and I think we'll do it. So I'm not, you may think I'm crazy, I'm not that worried about this. We just have to work through all the intricacies of the technology and the rulemaking and the business aspects, that could influence some gray areas, but we'll make it happen, and you'll see at the next commission meeting, you'll see a number of proposals related to ADT, and I firmly believe they'll be well accepted and thought out, and they won't, just be some general discussion. There's not going to be any animosity as far as I can tell. So, if there are any questions on ADT, I'll move on to other stuff. Next thing on my list is just all the communication initiatives, and it was just, I'm trying to encourage our staff here in Austin to all talk to you for 5 or 10 minutes, so I don't have to talk for an hour and a half. And we just screwed up. Bonnie should have been up here today, but we forgot to put her on the agenda, so at the next meeting, I'm going to let Bonnie give this. And I'm just going to tell you, she's been very busy, her and Lisa, in the public information arena for the agency. You have a number of examples in your books of things from press releases to Facebook to Twitter to whatever. We also have done a number of exhibits and have some planned. We're going to be at ICA in June. There's a media event next week at the Austin Airport on Texas emergency response that the agencies will go to. Last year the governor stopped by and visited with our people for quite a while. And as you can see, we were at TSCRA, State Emergency Management, and a couple of things, the Rodeo Austin, Rio Grande Rodeo Show. So we're very active in that, and we're proud to do that, and I think that's a very important part of our agency mission and service, is to provide education and outreach and information about our programs in general. Move on to disease-specific items. Trichomoniasis, don't have much on here because this afternoon there's a trick working group. You're all invited as long as no more than 6 of you come. Can't have a quorum there, but if anyone, 6 of you guys want to show up at the trick working group meeting, it starts at 1:30. And that's an example of how we do take input. You know, I can see us having the same kind of concept for ADT in the future. Let's have a working group that meets once a year and talks about ID issues, because they're going to change at the federal level and things will need to be tweaked. But so at 1:30 in this room, trick working group, I put there some of the main issues for discussion, and one of the biggest things is just going to be the consideration about letting bulls be resold untested at least once or within 7 days. And we've had a couple of markets just come to us and say, I don't have a lot of slaughter buyers. If you'd let me compete to buy that bull and then resell it at another market, I could get a better price. That'll help the producer. Your inspector's there. He can permit it. You're not going to lose the animal. And so that's one of the biggest issues that we're going to talk about is, do we consider more flexibility in a bull besides just going to slaughter or feedlot? In other words, if you say, well, you can resell it one time within 7 days, or you can resell it as long as it's no more than 7 days, or you got to start over. I think we're going to have that discussion. And there are a couple other minor things you can see on here about bulls moving. A lot of my waivers and my discussion on bulls, bull test station animals going to 12-month-old bulls have been in another state. Well, by our rules, if they're good quality bulls or breeding bulls, they have to have a test come back. And so I end up having to waive these things. And so Dr. Schwartz will actually talk to you about the disease part of it, the prevalence and the positives and all that. Just want to raise your awareness, and you're all invited this afternoon as long as there's not more than 7. So pyroplasmosis, again, Dr. Schwartz will give you some details. Equine pyroplasmosis. In my book, as you can see here, a couple of things. I think the drug cartel, the Zetas, were in trial here in Austin for about a month. Some of our folks were subpoenaed. A number of us had met with these guys more than once. We knew they were bad guys, but what do you do? They have quarantined animals, and so we worked it out. And then truthfully, from our perspective, they were right on their game. We had no trouble with any of them. They followed our rules and regulations, but there were a number of convictions, and I think what you're going to see, the only reason I even mention this is, I think this will soften the number of positives we're going to see in Texas. I think it's not going to be whatever it was before. It'll be half as many or a third as many. But with that said, pyro's not going away. We are next to Mexico. What we've seen now, interestingly enough, is some positives in other states for the first time in racing quarter horses, and so there may be some activity going on in other places in Texas. But we'll need our entry requirements for racetracks for a while, maybe indefinitely. We continue to find them. We found a new case last week down in the valley, race horses. So it is what it is. It's a disease that is considered foreign, and we're going to try our best to get it out of Texas, but the truth is we're going to be looking for it for a long time. The Kleberg County test, I've shared with y'all just some emails, some pictures. You know, we've been deployed down there. I want to congratulate Region 5 out of Beeville for managing a fairly complex process of testing. This is the second county test. They completed Kennedy. Truthfully, Kennedy, there's not hardly a town even there. It's a bunch of big ranches. Kleberg was a lot more complex, and we've had folks deployed using ICS principles as if it were any other kind of disaster response for organizational reasons since April 8th. Dr. Schwartz will give you the details, but bottom line is we found some pyro, and these are going to be in pasture situations, and those, we're looking for those because we can clean them up, because this tick is different than the fever tick. It doesn't really pass the organism on to its next generation of baby ticks, and so if you get the positive horse out of the pasture or you get it treated, the pasture will clean up. And that's our goal, is when we finish this, we can walk away from Kennedy and Kleberg County and say there's no more pyro in the pastures in the native tick populations, because in those counties it's not race horses and dirty needles, it's pasture, it's just the ticks. It's a good environment for ticks. We'll continue to do county tests down there till we don't find any more pyro, and I think we probably will end up next in Willacy County. It's probably the next one we're going to go to, and we'll go from there. And our epidemiology staff, Dr. Schwartz and his staff, has taken a close look at this, and we'll listen to their recommendations. But we found enough pyro in Kleberg County right now that we're not going to stop. We have to get that out, or there will become a time where our trade partners and other countries will say, you know what, this isn't a temporary issue. You guys have pyro in the United States and in Texas, and we don't want that. They're giving us the leeway right now to clean it up. So the deployment has been really good for us too, just to practice. I showed you guys a picture of the command trailer that DPS has been good enough to let us borrow. Truthfully, the agency needs something like that, and you may see a request at the next commission meeting if our budget works out. We really need something like that, so when we go to the West explosion, or when we go to the Granbury tornadoes, or we go to do a county test, we have a place our people could get out of the sun and out of the rain. And so keep that in mind, is that we're also testing out some new equipment down there. And on the brucellosis front, the big issue for us right now is interacting with USDA, and I've been one of the state vets. Myself and Dr. Barton from Idaho have been the leader of a southern group of state vets working with USDA Veterinary Services to try and formalize and finish up the national surveillance plan for brucellosis. You know, obviously the Texas, our first market stopped in 2011. We lost that surveillance. The slaughter plant surveillance across the United States is stopping now. The proposed plan that USDA threw out there, without truthfully a lot of interaction with the other state vets, was only tested eight slaughter plants, of which only one was in Texas, and that was L&H. We've made a counter proposal. There's a couple things there I think you need to know about from Animal Health Commission perspective. Part of our strategy, and I've been asked this before, what's your brucellosis strategy moving forward? Well, my best answer to you is that we're going to need to partner with USDA. We can't expect them to pay for all our brucellosis surveillance, and we can't expect them just to do everything like they used to. And so cost sharing is part of the mix. Again, if our budget's such, we'll have a little bit of money to help cost share. So my proposal is that we continue to collect brucellosis tests at 3 major plants in Texas: Cavanis, L&H, and Lone Star. And Cavanis, although it's not as significant to Texas, it's significant to the United States because they get a lot of cattle out of Colorado and out of the Yellowstone area. Lone Star is truthfully the plant that we get our most business. We get our best business from Lone Star. One, because of where they buy, and two, just the volume. It's a bigger slaughter plant than L&H, and so we don't want to lose our ability to continue to find brucellosis. And I've shared with you guys a couple of months ago, I think, the monthly epidemiology report that I felt like just kind of showed you a reflection of how diverse and busy we are. If any of you would like to have the one now, let me know and I'll get it for you. But the truth is we've probably got about 10 brucellosis reactors in the state of Texas that we're investigating. And most of them are actually from a Lone Star pack. So I don't want to lose that surveillance for a number of reasons. And so there's, you know, so what does that mean? I'm proposing a cost share, and I'm proposing that we help pay for collection, basically the plan that we pitched to USDA. And right now, we're the only state that's interested in continuing to run brucellosis slaughter blood. We were running a lot of slaughter blood. It's basically going to dry up unless I get some concession from USDA. And I'm sure Dr. Varner may have some comments on this, but you know, we're going to look at consolidating our 2 labs into 1 lab, and that'll be in Austin. And the folks in Fort Worth have already been told, and that lab will be closing the 1st of September, end of August. We possibly are going to have some jobs for them in this lab, and Larissa and Dr. Hughes Garza are working with those folks. But our capacity really in Austin is not going to be that diminished by closing and consolidating 2 labs into 1. And so I'm positioning us to be a regional resource for USDA. Truth is, we could run all the blood in the United States. They're going to cut their blood down to 1.3 million per year, 1.2 million per year. We have that capacity right now just in Austin. And so I've offered to USDA, you know, to cost share on the blood testing because we need the surveillance. I've also offered to USDA to let us run regional blood for the western United States. There's no reason shipping it to their lab in Kentucky. They have a federal lab in Kentucky, and that's all it does. And we're hearing there's capacity issues there. And so we're trying to be a partner with them. And basically what we're saying is if you'll get the blood at the slaughter plant, send it to us, and we'll run it. And these screening tests are just pennies, to be quite honest. And so it's very important to me and our staff. We've had a number of discussions with Dr. Varner and our internal staff to maintain brucellosis surveillance. We have Brucella suis, we have the wild hog version, we have Mexico, we have cattle. We have another herd from Mexico out in West Texas right now that we're going to need to work with USDA to catch 100 or more animals that can get into our marketing system. We have the Yellowstone issue, and so the brucellosis surveillance in Texas needs to be a long-term commitment from now on to protect ourselves, because we're more vulnerable than ever because we don't have good surveillance anymore. Our lab in Austin right now is running about 150,000 tests per year. It was running 3 million tests a year just 3 or 4 years ago, so there's the difference in that. Yellowstone, you will see a rule later on proposed in our brucellosis chapter. There's going to be 2 rules. One's just to pull the permanent official ID out, strike it for now. You'll see that reproposed next meeting. The second part is a proposal to require a retest on breeding animals, adult breeding, sexually intact animals, not adult, sexually intact, because it could be breeding heifers, from the states of Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. In your booklet is a map showing you the number of infected herds in those 3 states right now. What you have is a spillover from elk and bison populations into domestic cattle. Each of those states has at least 1 infected herd in the cattle as well as in bison, and then elk are highly infected. USDA is in the process of changing their rules for brucellosis and tuberculosis. I don't know when it'll come out, but the bottom line is the free status concept that we've lived with for so many years is really not relevant anymore. Those states are considered free of brucellosis, and they have an endemic issue, and what's being pitched as wildlife, but it's truthfully not. They're going to have continual spillover. We get between 15 and 20,000 breeding animals a year out of those 3 states. I've talked personally to every state vet of those 3 states. They know this is coming. We welcome their comments. If they can convince you guys that their animals should not be retested, then I would recommend a reconsideration. But I asked Dr. Schwartz, the Texas and the USDA vet epi staff to closely evaluate the federal review that just went on up there. The USDA went and reviewed all 3 of those states. I asked them to take a look at that, take a look at our surveillance systems, and make a recommendation. And their recommendation was exactly what I thought it was going to be. I'm a brucellosis epi as well. I just don't participate in those usually. I let them do that. Where Texas cattle coming in from those states need to be double checked to make sure we don't introduce brucellosis back in. So that's a rule proposal for later, and we can discuss that at that time. Border port issues, continue to work closely with the Texas industry on border issues. Dr. Varner and I attended the opening of the Nuevo Leon pens, which are an alternative to the 5 ports in Texas where Mexican imports are being inspected on the Texas side. That continues. But Nuevo Leon is built pens right across the river bridge. It's in Mexico. It's relatively safe as it can be going into Mexico. We went. We didn't get kidnapped or anything. It's not as safe as going to Round Rock, I'll just tell you that. But is it good enough? That's Dr. Varner's, that's his people. So, our animal health inspectors, we're helping them on this side as they need help. And truthfully, they fill some of our gaps the last couple of years with our cutbacks. And where I see the Animal Health Commission with some of this funding that we think we're going to get, we're going to have to fill his gaps now. He's losing, his budget is just a couple of years behind ours. And so I see a continued strong partnership between veterinary services, and one of the places that I see us reemerging is along the border. We need that for the protection of the Texas industry. And we'll help them with whatever fever tick issues they've got. We laid off 5 fever tick employees. We laid them off. I did that 2 years ago because he had fever tick folks. He's now looking at reducing the staff. We've got these border port issues, and we need our own general awareness in West Texas. And so you're going to see some of the folks, if we get the money to hire back, will be along the river. It's in our best interest to have a presence there, and Dr. Varner will have more. I'm real proud. We had the first time ever a meeting with the state and industry officials from Tamaulipas, Coahuila, and Nuevo Leon in Laredo to establish a relationship. It's something I've been wanting to do for a couple of years. We finally pulled it off. We're going to do it at least once a year, where we met half a day with Tamaulipas, which is basically Brownsville up just south of Laredo, and just talked about the river. We had maps of the river. We talked about crossings, low water areas, problems where animals come back and forth on both sides, and we have begun to develop a working relationship with the Mexican folks. So I don't want to have to call USDA if I want to talk to Tamaulipas. I've got 4 or 5 names. The same with Coahuila. So I think it was very beneficial to both USDA, the Cattle Fever Tick Program, and Animal Health Commission. And we're proud of that, and we're going to continue to have those meetings about once a year, and a lot of good dialogue there, so that's a good thing. The fever tick program, the numbers are down. Again, you're going to see at the next meeting probably some significant rulemaking for fever ticks. We're waiting on legislation that's probably going to pass. I know the governor hadn't signed it. Mary can tell you where it's at. But we needed some enhanced statutory authority, especially related to vaccine use and some deer surveillance on adjacent premises to move forward with rulemaking. If that bill passes, then at the next meeting you'll see some rulemaking related to the use of vaccine in the systematic zone, related to RFID tags and cattle in the systematic, so we'll have better inventory. Some of the problems in the past we've had down there, animals moving in and out that weren't supposed to, and we didn't have a good handle on the inventories, and so I'm working with Dr. Varner and his staff to get a better inventory. If you want to know how many cattle are in Pickett County, we should know that, and how many elk are in those counties, all the susceptible species. Because that small buffer zone is the key. We want to fight those ticks in the zone and not in the free area, and so you'll see here the numbers are down. We only have 8 herds out of the free area with ticks, and they're right across the road for the most part, and I want to keep it that way. But the statutory enhancement that should be coming for us will lead to rulemaking at the next meeting for you guys and to consider. The one thing I specifically want to mention, we're going to receive, one of the things USDA is looking at, I don't think they'll do it, I just think there's too many problems, but they took public comment, and they're looking at building a deer-proof fence from Brownsville all the way to Del Rio along the highway there that separates the systematic permanent quarantine zone from the free area. There's one place down in southern Zapata County, about 3 miles, where there's not a game fence, and we're having some problems with the deer continuing to walk up an arroyo from Mexico onto the free side. They just come up a ravine, basically. The herd owners there have said that if we want to build a fence, there's 3 little ranches. They're not the normal size. If we want to pay for it, they'll put a deer-proof fence in that would connect about 20 miles in both other directions. It's deer-proof all along the highway. We're going to take a look at this environmental impact study that the feds paid for, and if we can apply it to that little 3 mile, you may see us come back to you guys in the fall and discuss paying for 3 miles of deer-proof fence just to block what continues to be a problem. We have infested premises right there right now that we've just had reinfested in the last couple of months because these deer, it's just a natural migration for them from Mexico into and this fence would be on the other side of the highway. It's not, but we think we can make a stretch. But that'll be, however many thousands of dollars, money well spent if we can do that. And so be prepared or be thinking about it. And obviously we'll be talking to the elected officials down there as well and make sure there's not any issues there. I do want to thank Texas Department of Ag. They passed through $200,000 grant on fever tick to us. We gave a half of that to ARS in Kerrville for fever tick research, and that was used for the vaccine development. The other half is going to be used for us to buy vaccine. The vaccine should be finished this fall, and it looks to be more efficacious than we thought, especially for the microplus tick, but it won't be ready by the end of August when we have to buy it to use the money. So in discussions with TDA, basically they were nice enough to say if you guys can buy some equipment related to fever tick activities, just go ahead. And if we don't do that, we're going to give the rest on back to ARS to continue their research. So I want to thank TDA publicly for their support of the fever tick research and giving us the flexibility to use it however we see fit. And the truth is the folks that are making the vaccine, they're going to either charge us almost nothing or give us the vaccine. Our volume needs in Texas is not what they're looking to Australia and Brazil for their market, and so we may not need the money after all, but it's very much appreciated that we can buy some equipment related to that. Swine health, just keep an eye on. Commissioner Real's involved. The H3N2 virus that I was part of a national working group. I was lucky enough to be involved with those folks who developed protocols for interaction between humans and swine at shows when the swine become sick or humans become sick. This is a flu virus where it's suspected that more likely the swine are giving it to the humans. The H1N1 from a couple of years ago was actually the other way around. The humans were giving it to the pigs. But what we worked out with, and we worked with the Extension and some other folks, is worked out some guidelines for shows to use. One, to kind of protect the interaction between animals and humans, and also what do you do if you get sick pigs or sick people during a show. And this has actually happened in a couple other states. we're going to see this fall, we're going to have some management meetings this summer with our staff, but we're going to roll out in the fall. You're going to have our veterinarians and our inspectors going to talk to large shows and events about biosecurity for horses and hogs, and this is one of the things we want to talk to them about. It's an appropriate role for the Animal Health Commission to help them, one, mitigate any problems if there is a sickness during the show, and two, be preventative in helping them design their setup to eliminate potential spread. For example, if you've got a sow farrowing exhibit at the state fair, where they put a couple of sows there with babies just so that people can come by and walk and look at them. There's certain ways that you can set that up and protect that so that you allow people to see something like that without having interaction to the point that it could be blamed for a disease transmission. So I'm very proud of that. And also next week there's USDA is taking comments on feral swine mitigation activities, and in their mind it's wildlife services. You can see here the message that I'm going to turn in is don't forget the Animal Health Agency. Yeah, Wildlife Services shoots wild hogs out of helicopters and traps them, but the truth is when they're developing wild hog mitigation activities, the state animal health agencies are the ones that regulate the movement. And so if they're talking about trapping hogs or hunting them and moving them through pressure to other locations, our rules and regulations come into effect. So you can see here, I put in here my comments that I'm going to make. Also funding. The funding is Wildlife Services. It'd be nice if Dr. Varner's folks had funding that they could pass through on feral swine disease transmission risks to domestic swine. And so I'm trying to raise their awareness on that. And finally, the national folks and Commissioner Real may want to say something, but I know at the national level those folks are looking at the pin tag process and possibly some future animal disease traceability requirements, at least for breeding sows nationally, that might be recommended down at the state level. We'll just stay plugged in and we'll work with the Texas industry, and if they wish for y'all to consider rules related to that, we'll do it, and if not, we'll stay out of it. But be prepared. The swine industry is talking about requiring more identification for breeding animals. I don't know if you want to say any more than that right now or not. So we'll leave that at that. Tuberculosis, Dr. Swartz will have more information, but TB is here to stay. We're going to have TB. TB, California has dairies with TB. Michigan is in kind of a mess. I'll just say that I don't know how to say it any nicer than that. They're finding TB out of their zone. They've got a wildlife population that they're not able to get a handle on. And the deer, white-tailed deer, primarily because of the density of deer and the propensity to feed deer because the winters are harsh. Whether they want to feed deer or not, if they're feeding cattle, the deer will sneak in and eat the same food. And so we're going to have a risk for Michigan. We've got a risk in the dairy industry in general. California's had 4 infected herds in the last 3 years. We have 2 herds of cattle, heifer herds out of those right now. It's in Texas, just a big state. We have a lot of trade, a lot of calf ranches. Our calf ranch is a biosecurity process. We're working that. Also Mexico, obviously, just, roping steers and all those things that go on with the Mexican trade. Our job is to mitigate the risk and prevent the industry from stopping the trade, and we're doing a pretty good job of that, but from time to time there'll be issues. Dr. Dow, our Fort Worth Regional Director, is in Querétaro today at the binational TB meeting. USDA is going to step up and start back some TB reviews in at least 4 states this fall, and they've asked us to participate. And some of our staff, including myself, will consider doing that if time allows, so be aware of that. You're also going to see a rule later on a blood test for deer on the rules to be considered. It's being used by USDA. I'm also trying to position our laboratory, and I want to congratulate Dr. Hughes Garza is on the National Lab Committee. You can tell them what the name of it is when you come up here, but she's one of the state reps on the USDA National Animal Health Lab Network. And I also want our lab to start running this deer test as soon as it's validated. They're working through some little things, but we would like for Texas Cervid folks to have this test in our lab in Austin. We're already running a similar test for cattle, and it makes sense for us to have that, and we're trying to work with USDA on that as well. And finally, there is one piece of legislation related to dairy presence in El Paso, and had very good working relationship with the state rep Gonzalez and the folks, and on this bill, and what we've kind of decided, you know, on the books right now, if you look in our rules right now, there are rules related to El Paso that it's because it's high risk. And we may need to take a look at that. If it's not high risk, we may want to consider amending those rules. If it is high risk, we haven't done some things in 6 or 7 years. No one can remember hardly why we stopped doing those, but I will tell y'all, one thing that I'm going to do is we're going to go back out there probably in the spring of 2014. I don't think we can pull it off because if we get money and hire some folks back, El Paso is where we need to have a presence. We probably need to go back out there and retest the susceptible species in El Paso. That's cattle, hogs, sheep, goats primarily. There are some beef cattle in El Paso and part of Hudspeth County is in the zone. If we go retest those and we don't have any TB, I think that probably regardless of the legislation, regardless of whether it passes or not, the commission may want to look at amending the risk zone in El Paso. Should the little area right along the Rio Grande River be at risk? Yeah, probably forever, but we've got an entire county locked down. So I think you're going to see us active in El Paso probably in the spring of 2014 to reevaluate is there TB in those susceptible species. And if there's not now, and it's been 5 or 6 years since we've been out there, then maybe the commission should reconsider that regardless of legislation. We're also going to take a look at the prevalence in Juarez. There's 3 dairies in Juarez. The Mexicans are saying that they're free of TB. That's one of the reasons we do need to get more involved, and that's why I have Dr. Dow at the meeting in Querétaro. The Animal Health Commission needs to keep people at the national meetings and the binational meeting. Chairman Morales has been to those before. Texas needs to be. We're the only state there. The other states just say, we're not going. We're going to have someone there always because of our trade issues and the proximity and the disease risk that we have. So, chronic wasting disease. I'm not going to say a lot. I think Dr. Schwartz can talk about that. There's going to be some comments later. There's federal rules out there with rules and guidelines. There's the quarantine zone in Waco Mountains in West Texas. There's the entry rules for red deer that you guys have already took a look at. I think what you're going to see here is the elk and red deer industry coming to the table today, hopefully, you know, with a commitment to try and work on some surveillance and movement activities that will help prevent the risk of inadvertent transmission of CWD through those species. I think the commission needs to be committed to protecting all cervid species in the state of Texas. These rules will help do that, but I would recommend that we watch this very closely, and if there are still loopholes or obvious non-compliance with certain parts of this, you may need to reconsider some tighter rules and regulations within the next year. And I'll let these guys, the industry folks are here, and they can say what they want to say. But I believe the rules for CWD for the species that we regulate are just in the first or the second inning of a 9-inning game, and I think this is a work in progress. And we hope that these are successful, but the main reason is that I'm saying this is the commission needs to make sure that it does all it can to prevent the introduction of CWD in Texas from the species that it regulates. And I think you're on the right track, but we need to continue to watch this very closely. And Dr. Schwartz will have more information. He's been more involved than me, to be quite honest, on some of the rulemaking and the intricacies of that. And there are going to be some rules that can be amended related to what appears to be changes in the national position. And there's some folks here that are on that national working group. Well, I'm down to my last thing, which is just some miscellaneous stuff. Got emergency management down here. I just want to say how proud I am of our staff. The Animal Health Commission, we're understaffed, we don't have the equipment, we don't have anything but people, and we're going to West, we're going to Granbury. I was in contact with the State Vet of Oklahoma last night and offered him people if he needs them. I don't even know where I'm going to get them, but if he needs somebody, we're going to send some folks up there. But the Animal Health Commission is a leader in animal emergency management issues in the state of Texas, and I'm very proud of that. I want to congratulate Amanda and Jeff and the folks, and all of our field staff, and all the staff in this office, you know. Fabian sitting over there in the corner, he worked to get our T-shirts that say Animal Health, so when we respond, people know who we are. I mean, it's a team effort. Everyone in this agency is involved with emergency management, and that's taken a number of years to get that mindset that this agency as a team helps other states. We help our industry, we help ourselves, we help each other, and hopefully we won't have a big hurricane, but if they have one, we'll be ready and we'll work with our industry partners. I've already mentioned the event disease management initiatives, the HB1, H3N2, HB1 in horses, and H3N2 in swine. I want our veterinary staff and other selected staff this fall to go meet with all the large show and event managers, not and their vets this fall and start to talk about biosecurity, good ideas. These aren't rules or regulations, they're just good ideas to help them protect themselves, protect their entrance, protect their animals in these events, and mainly establish relationships. So if we have a problem later, they know who we are, we know who they are. We already know there's a belt buckle sale at such and such place on Thanksgiving weekend. We should not be in a, I want to engage with these industries and spend a little more time being their partner for everyone's benefit. And finally, I'll say that I've mentioned the money. We are going to start to spend a little money. We've saved the money. Part of my problem now is leading this agency is trying to get people to think strategically. What do you need? We have broken equipment, unsafe equipment. We have missing equipment. We have things that where I say it's okay if we need to buy X, Y, Z. Ask. We'll buy you whatever the widget is you need. And so, we're looking to re-engage our staff, the veterinarians and the regional management in June, and then our inspectors in July and August. And part of what I want to impart to them is what I see is the future, the changing paradigm of this agency to be more facilitatory and engage in partnerships as we finish the federally mandated prescriptive eradication programs like brucellosis and TB. The future of the agency is working with shows on H3N2, working with the cattle industry on trick guidelines, same with animal disease traceability. I think our position is well established, but it's going to take some relaxation in some ways and some redirection in other ways for our staff to get it. That you are a commission of diverse industry groups, and you are here as a whole, but each of you has needs, and we need to work with your industries to keep you in business, keep the commodity safe, keep the public trust safe, keep the animal issues healthy and marketable. So we will be having training with all our field staff. If any of you would like to come to any of those meetings, I would invite you. If you want to come introduce yourself, come to breakfast or a happy hour, you want to come talk. They're all three going to be in San Marcos, and our regional management will be there in June, and then our inspectors will be one group in August and one group in July, and we would welcome anybody that wants to come talk about your industry or your organization, or just say, well, I'll get you those days. I want to thank Larissa. She took over new roles. This is one of her roles along with Carol in organizing these. We've already had our admin techs, but I just want to say that should have done it years ago, but Larissa's new role, she's an experienced manager. She's going to come up here and talk to you. She took over when Sammy left as far as oversight. She's already over HR, but now over computers and over finance and over, she's not doing their job. She's just the managerial buffer between me and them, to be quite honest, because I can't directly manage all these things. The purchasing, staff supply, guys, it's been a very good change, and I'm proud of her and her willingness to take on new duties, and she'll talk to you later. I'm not going to go through the waivers. There's 8 waivers. 1 denial. I didn't let a buck and bull come from Hawaii that was from a quarantine herd. He had a ride. I mean, I don't blame him for asking, but if you have catch a ride from Hawaii to Stephenville, it's a pretty good deal. And so I told him no, and they got him tested in 24 hours. So you can see the waivers there. The last thing, look at the last page of my report. There's 2, 4, 6, 8. There's 10 possible rule proposals. This is my original point, and I'll end with this. The diversity of issues affecting this agency is greater than ever, and we need you guys. I just ask you guys, thank you for your involvement. I need you guys to stay plugged in, because Andy and I truthfully are not experts on everything. There are 7 federal rulemaking processes going on 7 different species issues. And so you'll see us this fall if we get the budget. Regardless, we're going to hire some staff back. I need some more people in this office to help with that. But you can see ADT, fever ticks. We want to re-engage the cattle feeders about M-brands next to breeding animals to see if there's some issues there that we can. Pyroreactors need microchips. We've had a request to allow processed food be fed to hogs. Trick Manones, whatever changes in the Trick Working Group come up this afternoon, that's going to Gene and Mary. We have a poultry-specific issue I'll talk with Commissioner Simmons about related to live bird markets. The CWD sample process, there's legislation that if it passes and is signed by the governor, will allow the agency to create a training certification program for owners, cervid herd owners, to collect brains and send them straight in, and this will save them money for CWD. And that will be a program that the Animal Health Commission will have to promulgate rules and then have a staff that's willing to do that and not willing, but trained to do that. And that'll be a big deal. But you'll see rules. And then there's one little piece of our mains chapter, our mites, and that we wanted to be fixed because we ran into it with a show heifer earlier this year, but you're going to see probably a complete rewrite of the mains chapter, which hasn't been updated since ivermectin was created. Used to have to dip animals for mange, and it was a big deal, and we had task force in the panhandle for mange, and now we have injectables and treatments that are just not, our rules don't reflect the new technology, and so we need to get that fixed. Otherwise, I have to make a waiver. I had to give a waiver for a show animal to go to a show using a product we know worked, but our rules didn't say it was okay, so that's what I want to fix. I'll stop there. I apologize for going too long, but I hope y'all get a feel for what we're doing, and my intent is to let you feel comfortable that the agency's being managed and run well, and we're trying to address all these issues, and I'm proud of the staff and what they've done, and I'll be glad to answer any questions y'all might have.
Any questions? Then how about a motion?
Chair, I move that we approve the actions of the executive director for the period from January 16, 2013 through May 20.
Second it.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the actions of the executive director from the period January 16, 2013 through May 21st, 2013. Is there any further discussion? None, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Motion carries. Motion carries. Item 4, Mary Ludiker's going to give us the legislative update. You've been very busy. We're glad to have you as part of our team. And proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. It is an honor to be here and be able to serve the commission through the legislative process and be able to work with our stakeholders and legislators to protect and promote and secure Texas livestock. Many of those stakeholders are in the room. Many of the commissioners have been involved in this legislative process, and I want to thank all of you for your support and your role in protecting our industries. It has been a very active, very busy session, and I'm going to talk about 8 bills in specific that will have an impact on our commission if passed. Right now, we are 6 days away from the end of the regular session. Things are moving very fast. Dr. Ellis gave you some updates, but wasn't sure whether or not bills had passed because things are changing every hour. Let's start with the budget. Early on in the process, our Finance Committee in the Senate had recommended that we have an additional revenue of $1.8 million. The House had recommended an additional revenue of $4 million for the biennium. Just over a week ago, the Conference Committee met and they adopted the House recommendation. That is in no way final, but it is promising that we look like we'll have $4 million additional revenue in 2014 and 2015, which amounts to 24 additional FTEs. We'll see how that plays out, and whether or not on the 26th we'll know that budget's adopted or not. Next bills that I'd like to talk about, all of these bills, 5 of them, have passed both the House and the Senate. As of last night, 2 passed, but they have been sent to the commission, to the governor, and only 1 has been signed by the governor, but I haven't heard of anything meeting resistance there, but you never know. The first bill is House Bill 1521. It relates to the depopulation and indemnification of domestic and exotic fowl. We have had this authority for livestock for many, many years, and this is just a conforming change that allows the agency, we do not have to, it's our discretion, to move and act when birds or poultry are infected and could otherwise infect the industry in the state. The next bill, and that bill was sent to the governor on the 13th, so it would go into effect, or it would be passed on the 24th, if not signed by the governor before then. The next bill, House Bill 2311, that is the animal disease traceability rule, and this has received a lot of attention this session. And I just want to walk through and give you a little more detail about this bill because there's a lot of misconceptions about what it does and how it affects the commission. First, it removes any ambiguity there is regarding the reference to NACE. It takes out that ambiguity and makes it clear that we do have the authority to act for animal disease traceability when there's disease control or emergency management. And we can enact rules for animal identification, which is a simple majority vote of the commission. It also specifies that when we are dealing with a specific disease, the commission with a higher vote, a 2/3 vote, can enact more stringent rules than the federal rules. So that is important because we have circumstances with border Mexico, we have trichomoniasis that are unique to this state that need to be addressed to protect our industries. And we have that authority under this legislation if passed by the governor or approved by the governor. What this bill also does is protect and secure and grandfather in those rules that are already in effect that have more stringent rules such as trichomoniasis and dairy ID. And we worked with many stakeholders to make sure that those industries who wanted to preserve those rules had that specified in the legislation. The last thing that, or actually the two last things that were changed in the legislation, first it removes our requirement to charge a fee for premise registration. And lastly, it removes our authority to issue a Class C misdemeanor for violating animal ID rules. So this legislation, it goes a long way in making sure what our authority is and when we can act, but it also gives us the flexibility to protect our industries when we need it. The next bill, House Bill 1081, which Dr. Ellis briefly mentioned by Representative Gonzalez, has to do with the dairy report. We have to go in and take a close look at what is being done by USDA and Mexico to eradicate tuberculosis. We have to look at the risk that the border presents to the states and also assess the current risk in El Paso to the rest of the state. And Dr. Ellis had indicated we're planning to test those animals in the spring and have a good idea of where we stand in El Paso. That bill actually passed out last night by both, it passed out of the Senate, and so it will be sent to the governor. And because we are within 10 days at the end of the legislative session, if he does not sign that bill, it would pass 20 days from the date that it's sent to the governor. So it's on its way, and I've actually heard there's support in the governor's office for that particular piece of legislation. The next bill, fever tick, which Dr. Ellis briefly mentioned, is going to expand our authority and is a conforming change to what technology and science shows with fever ticks. It is bigger than just livestock. It affects deer. Deer can perpetuate the life cycle of a fever tick. And also there are many treatments that are available that are more cost efficient and effective for producers to use. And so what this legislation does is go in and change the definition or change the use of livestock to animals that are susceptible for carrying the babesia. And also it changes the reference to dipping to treatment so that we can capture those vaccines that might be available with the topical treatments, the molasses tubs that are very effective in fighting and eradicating and controlling that disease, that fever tick population. The next bill, I'm going to go out of order from what is in your report, is Senate Bill 820, and I want to discuss that because it's one of the ones that has passed both session and is the only one that has been signed by the governor. This has to do with deer, and what this legislation does is it codifies that the Texas Animal Health Commission, when Texas Parks and Wildlife is considering depopulating deer, they need to engage the Texas Animal Health Commission. We work with Mitch and Parks and looking at this legislation. And what our role would be is that we would produce, and if time is available and funding is available, an epidemiological assessment of what the disease risk is and provide that to Texas Parks and Wildlife to consider in determining whether or not deer should be depopulated. Another element that affects us in that particular legislation is cost recovery. It does say that the herd owner should pay the cost of that epidemiological assessment. There are two other bills, or actually three other bills that are on here. Senate Bill 1750, once it was referred to the House, it did not make it out of the House Ag Committee. This report had to go to print last Friday, so this is something that's changed. So that was our Class C misdemeanor authority, expanding it to capture things of hold order, and that's not going to happen this session. The two others that have a potential of making it to the governor but haven't passed one of the chambers is starting with 3569. This is approved personnel legislation, and what it does is codify many of the things that the agency is already doing, compliance assisting and requiring veterinarians and those that are performing functions as part of a disease and control eradication program to meet particular standards, have particular training, and that they need to have some type of accountability in being able to perform those functions. It would codify the continuing education and many of the things that we are doing. This bill was heard in public hearing on Monday. It was voted out of the committee. The report was distributed last night, and so this is going to be a bill that might be able to be considered late this evening or tomorrow. And since tomorrow is the last day that Senate bills can be heard, or excuse me, House bills can be heard in the Senate, second and third readings, we're up against the clock with this one, but it does have a chance. The last bill is House Bill 2150, and although we do not believe this will impact our legislation and our authority, we have been told that it's supposed to be preserving our authority with relation to elk. It is changing the classification of elk from an exotic species to recognizing it as an indigenous species. And that is another one that, again, the clock's ticking, but it's there and we're keeping our eye on it. Those are the 8 bills that will have the most impact on the agency at this point. We're watching them closely. Anything can happen when they're sent to the governor, and anything can happen with our budget, but it does look promising, and I think it goes a long way, this legislation that's out there, to protecting and promoting and securing our industry. So I'm available for any questions if you have any.
I just want to go on the record thanking you for all your hard work, and for a new employee to come in. She's done great, and for your working relationship with our stakeholders and our staff. I can't thank you enough and brag on you for your good job this session. I just want to make sure y'all know that.
Thank you, Mary. Next, item 5, Dr. Schwartz will give us a presentation on animal health program activities. Good morning, Andy.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. Before I begin my report, I just take a few minutes to introduce the newest member of our staff here in Austin. He's new to Austin, but not new to the agency by any means, and it's Russell Esel. So Russell, if you'll stand up. Thank you. Russell was most recently in the Region 7 office as a supervising inspector. He's come to Austin to head up our program records department and the traceability role that Kenny Edgar was playing before. So we see those jobs as overlapping, and we're pleased to have his experience here in Austin to head those up as we move into electronic age, electronic CVIs, capture and storage of records to meet traceability rules. So Russell, before coming to the agency, managed a livestock market, so he's got some experience there, some real world experience, and so we welcome Russell to Austin. He went immediately to work, so this is great. So, okay, for my report, I'll begin with cattle, or livestock diseases, tuberculosis. In calendar year 2012, there were 8 TB cases, and you've heard me report on those before. I'll just give you a little bit of an update. 6 of those were feeder steers that came from Mexico. 1 was a beef cow in Coke County. We found the herd of origin there and tested it and confirmed TB, and was able to depopulate that herd to slaughter. Tested adjacents. We're still working on, a year later, we're still working on tracing out some animals there. They sold almost 1,000 animals out of that herd. There were steers and heifers, and hardly any of them had identification. They weren't CAFA vaccinated, so those heifers didn't have a tag. The ranch didn't brand them before they sold those animals, so it's difficult to trace them, but we're doing the best we can with those, tracing them primarily through lots that go to feeder, but focusing where we can our effort on those cattle that might have been, those heifers that might have been turned into breeding animals. The 8th case is another case that I talked about, a slaughter lesioned animal, a beef cow that we never found the herd of origin of that one. We tested a dozen herds in Texas, investigated a number more. Oklahoma tested 5 herds, and because there was no ID captured on that animal, we're not able to find the herd of origin. It made it more difficult, but we were unsuccessful in finding the herd of origin. So our concern is that there's TB out there still in our domestic beef herd. So far this year in 2013, we've had 5 TB cases. They were all steers at slaughter, all fed cattle. 4 of those were still wearing the tags from Mexico, so we obviously have trace backs on those. The 5th one did not have ID other than the feedlot tag on it, so we just got that case this week, so we're working on that to see where might be the herd of origin for that. Brucellosis, you heard Dr. Ellis talk about. Most of our traces are coming from testing at Lone Star Pack, and we hope to continue that testing to keep that surveillance up there. We're doing about 10 to 20 investigations a month on tied animals. So, going back to tuberculosis, traces from out of state, you heard Dr. Ellis mention that we got 2 lots of heifers from an infected herd in California, their most recent herd, and those heifers left that dairy 2 years ago as day-old calves. So, and they went to a grower, made their way to Texas into organic operations. They're springing heifers now. So the good news is that we were able to find every one of those by the ear tag. So there was 118 in one group, and 86 animals in the other. So the good news is we're able to find those animals and test just those animals rather than the entire herd that they were in. Due to the value of those animals and the limited federal funds that are available, we were not able to offer those herd owners, the current owners, a complete, fair market value for those heifers. We couldn't buy them and send them to slaughter, basically. So if the owner did that, it would have meant taking a substantial loss on the value of those animals. So we were able to give them an option of testing out those heifers, and we feel like, given the length of time, the 2 years since it left an infected herd, and stacking up our tests, running 3 tests in parallel at the same time, we think once those heifers have passed that second round of testing, we feel like they're very low risk and feel comfortable releasing them. So it's not exactly by federal rules, so Dr. Varner, cover your ears, but it's we feel like with the knowledge and the wisdom of working with tuberculosis over years, that these animals are very, very low risk. Trichomoniasis. We have a working group meeting this afternoon. As Dr. Ellis said, I think it's the third annual meeting. Just looking at the numbers, last year there were about, actually so far this first quarter this year, first 3 months, about 10,000 bulls have been tested. A little over 300 of them are positive. So that gives us about a 3% test positive rate. If you look at the same time last year, so it's 3% this year. At the same time last year, it was 1.4%. It was way down. The year before that, it was about 2%. So and then the first year, it was 3%. So it took a drop last year, and then it's headed back up. I'm not sure. That may have something to do with, restocking the kinds of bulls that are going out. I'm not sure. There's probably a research paper in there somewhere to figure out what's going on, but hopefully it doesn't mean that there's more trichomoniasis overall in the Texas herd. Fever ticks, Dr. Ellis gave you some details, and Dr. Varner will do more, so I won't spend your time on that. On swine, the pseudorabies, we had 5 infected herds last year. All of them were tied to contact with feral swine. We've had 2 infected herds this year and 1 brucellosis herd that's under investigation, again with contact with feral swine. We are keeping a lookout for, it seems like there's a new swine disease about every year, but the porcine epidemic diarrhea virus is the first time that's been diagnosed in the Western Hemisphere recently in Iowa, so we'll see how that goes. That's a viral disease that kills baby pigs primarily, and again, it's something that hopefully we won't have to have a program for, but we want to keep an eye out to see if we want to set entry requirements against that. From switching to the equine topics, equine pyroplasmosis, Dr. Ellis has mentioned, and he's given you some updates on the Clayburgh County high-risk test. Our staff began that test in April 8th this year. We estimated initially that there'd be about 500 horses in that area we wanted to test. We've already found almost 750 horses and have about another 50 to go before we're done with that. But I guess unfortunately we are finding some pyro in those horses. We've had 19 positive horses out of that 750 tested, a little more than we expected. 5 of the 19 were on single premises, so it's one positive horse on the premise. But the 14 of them were in one pasture. So 14 out of 14 horses in one pasture were positive. They had a lot of the cayenne tick, the tick that we know can transmit the disease, so we think it was just spreading amongst those horses through the ticks there. So within the next couple of weeks, we'll wrap up testing of that, of all of those remaining 30 or so horses that are left, and some donkeys that aren't broken at all. It's quite a rodeo to get some of these animals tested, so it gets a little bit western sometimes. The animals aren't accustomed to being handled, so. But the crew's doing a good job there. We've had state and federal people rotating down for, I think the admin techs are going for a week at a time, and the inspectors are going for 2 weeks at a time. And driving, and Hawley, Dr. Hawley's been working with them for mapping, so they know where they've been, which horses have been tested, and that sort of thing. So I think the process is working well. And as Dr. Ellis mentioned, once we finish the southern part of Clayburgh County, we'll move to the northern part. It shouldn't take very long, another month or two to knock that out, and then we'll probably go to Willacy County, where we've had some infection on some ranches there. I just want to briefly mention contagious equine metritis. That's a venereal disease of horses. It's considered foreign to the United States. Texas did receive a stallion from California that had gotten exposed at a breeding facility there. They had some Lusitania, a mare and a stallion positive there, and this Texas stallion was at that same facility. So Dr. Dow in our Region 3 office oversaw the test breeding and all of that stallion. He's now been released, so we didn't have a diseased animal here. Equine herpes virus has kept us concerned and busy for the last year or so. We did have a mare that came to Texas from that event in Ocala, Florida. She was exposed to EHV1. It normally causes abortions or respiratory signs in foals and in mares, but sometimes it causes neurologic signs. So the horse gets weak, wobbly, semi-paralyzed, and can die from the disease. So we had a mare exposed to that strain of the virus in Florida, went through the quarantine and testing period here. It's now released. And we had a little scare here at a stable close by, not 3 or 4 miles from where we are now. 18 horses there. One horse had neurologic signs. The veterinarian tested it, came up positive for EHV1. So those horses were destined to go to a big show at Houston, but we held them up for 28 days and retested those animals to get them released. So we had one more horse out of that group test positive, but none with neurologic signs. So all the EHV1 quarantines have been released. It is a little bit encouraging to me that on the national level, the equine industry seems to be coming together, get a little more organized. They plan to have a communications group that set up a service so that when there is a disease outbreak, they can get word out, accurate information to the equine industry across the nation. And that's really the first time in a while I've seen any movement, for a national organization for the equine industry. It's tended to be pretty fractionated. Sheep and goats, I just quickly mentioned that we had 2 foreign animal disease investigations. One of those was in the export pens, the TDA export pens. That sheep had some oral lesions. It came up negative for foot and mouth disease, obviously, or we would be talking about something else today, big time. But it did test positive for blue tongue and some other things, so that shut off exports for about a 3-week period there. Scrapie, we haven't had to talk about that for a while. We didn't have a case in Texas, but we have had 7 ewes that traced from a flock in Ohio. We were, again, because of excellent ID in that species in sheep and goats, we were able to find all those animals, and we're doing genetic testing to see, and so far all the ones we've tested have been resistant, so we don't have a scrapie concern there. From the poultry standpoint, we're monitoring the avian influenza outbreak in Mexico. That thing just keeps going on, and that H7N9 is H7N3 in Mexico it's killing poultry. When they did the pathogenicity testing at the lab, they inoculated 8 chickens, and the next day all 8 of them were dead. So that tells you how deadly that virus is for poultry. It's got our poultry industry really concerned, so we're keeping tabs on that. It's spread to 3 states in Mexico now. We're also monitoring the H7N9 in China. I know that's a long way from here, but that It's a unique virus in that it doesn't make poultry sick, but in people, it's fatal in about a quarter of the people infected. So they had 35 deaths in humans that were infected there, so that would cause us grave concern if we got that disease here. My last species group to talk about is the cervids and exotics. Chronic wasting disease, Texas has a temporary provisional approval status to ship deer interstate, and you'll be considering some rule proposals and adoptions later on today. Some of those proposals are in Chapter 40 actually soften the requirements a bit for a herd certification program. Instead of specifying an 8-foot fence, it says a fence to prevent ingress and egress. And that's actually by the federal rule. So we're softening back to the rule and not going beyond the rule like the standards did. So doing that a bit. The only place that you'll see that's tightening the rule up a bit is some USDA, where USDA said we needed to be able to test animals of any age if they're exposed to CWD or if it's from a suspect herd. So we need to change the rule or consider changing the rule to be able to have the authority to test cervids of any age if they're exposed to CWD. So you'll see that in your proposal today. That doesn't mean that a monitored herd has to test animals that die of any age, only if they're exposed to CWD. The last topic is tuberculosis, and I don't get to talk about rhinoceri very often in this report, so I wanted to bring this up. But tuberculosis was diagnosed post-mortem in a black rhinoceros in a zoo in East Texas. We've worked, it sort of brings up some issues like Dr. Ellis asked the question, who's in charge? Because this is a mycobacterium tuberculosis. It's primarily a disease of humans, but it can affect animals, obviously. Is it the health department? Is it the zoo? Is it USDA Veterinary Services or USDA Animal Care? The answer is there's not any one authority, one agency in charge, but Dr. Ellis encouraged us to work with all of those different agencies to conduct the investigation of these animals in this case and see that humans and animals are tested that were exposed. So with that, I'll conclude my report.
Any questions for Dr. Schwartz? Andy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Varner, good morning. Dr. Varner is going to give us an update on veterinary services, USDA.
Chairman Morales and the Commissioners, I appreciate the opportunity to give a brief update. You know, the last thing Andy mentioned was the rhinoceri, and that, I keep thinking about, we have one regulatory veterinarian, you know, on our staff that was run over by a rhino, okay? And so whenever these things come up, we make sure he is not detailed, okay? 'Cause he actually has like a new hip because of the rhino from years ago, and also because he's a little bit heavy, but, okay. Let's go, I have just several things to talk about. I have a handout. It's like, that I'll basically speak from and to just point out several things. And I'm going to really focus on ticks and ports and then questions. But on ticks, you know, Dee mentioned the trend lines are the direction we want them to go. And you'll see on this handout, this section right here, looks at April of the last 4 years. From 110 to 114, 59 to 35. The trend lines are the way we want it, the direction we set out to push this tick, to lower the numbers and push the tick back to the border. And that's what's happening. So there's two things about numbers. The numbers are coming down, and the second thing is the locations of those herds, those infested pastures. They're closer to the river. The ones that are in the free area are basically just right there. I'd like to give two updates on the tick program on two new technologies that we've talked about a lot over the last few years. And one is our ivermectin tub technology. Second is vaccines. On tubs, in the last 6 months, we've rolled out the tubs under an authority that FDA granted. It's called the Investigational New Animal Drug Authority, so INAD. We've rolled these out into the field. We've got, in Zapata County, we have 15 pastures, 547 head exposed to the tubs. In Starr County, we've got 29 pastures, 792 head. that are feeding on these tubs. Our experience has been great. What we do is we treat whole neighborhoods. The producers love them. We've had really great acceptance. The only issue we've got is the withhold time. So we have to work with individuals on withhold time to make sure it works. But everybody likes these tubs. The beauty of it is that these animals self-treat. We gather just 60 days, you know, in beyond, 60 days, and then in adjacent herds, we're gathering just every 90 days. So it's down in that neck of the woods. This is a real breakthrough for the producers, and we're really happy with how it's working at this point. I'll talk about vaccine. And the way I want to talk about vaccine is start out with Dee and my vision on the vaccine vision, and that we always talk to producers, and every time I talk about vaccine, it's about building a barrier, okay, a proactive barrier of cattle that will kill ticks along the border. That's our goal. You know, of immunizing cattle and maintaining that barrier along the entire permanent quarantine zone. We first, with the help of the commission, brought in Gavic vaccine, and we figured out with the Gavic vaccine that it works. 100% effective against annulitis. It was an effective vaccine. The problem was we could never get beyond the experimental designation, and so it had limited use for us. He has been, in the commission, USDA, we've worked with Pfizer, and now it's called Zoetis, and they've come forward with a new opportunity on vaccine, producing basically the same kind of vaccine, same antigen, pardon me, that Gavic uses. And they formed a partnership with ARS, and what's ongoing right now is with vaccine is we finished a trial down at Mission, Texas, with annulitis, with this new vaccine Zoetis produced. It's 100% effective against annulitis. We're just finishing up the MicroPlus study. Preliminary results are at 70% effective against MicroPlus. They've got to watch how the eggs hatch. They think the eggs are that's going to be even actually more effective than 70% at the end of the day. So we're really excited about the vaccine. So now the question is, how do we get it into our hands and into our field, and how do we get it into cattle? So what we did is we first, when Dee and I first approached this, looked at this with our staffs and with USDA, ARS, and our folks in DC, we thought about conditional licensing. Okay, let's get to a conditional license. The issue we've run into is that there's a bar you got to cross to get that conditional license. And Zoetis is basically making this vaccine just for Texas Animal Health Commission, just for USDA, and they tell us they want to give it to us. I don't know if they're going to give it to us, but we're going to, whatever the expense, it won't be very much for a vaccine. But they want to make it for us, just for us, but they don't want to put a lot of money into the approval process. And so the conditional license just has too much of a barrier for us. And so this past week I had a meeting with our Center for Veterinary Biologics and our staff in DC, and we're going to go with the administrator's exemption route. This is a little used authority that the administrator of APHIS has. It's only been used once before, and that's for the BSE test kits. You know that big rush to get BSE test kits? Boom, we went the administrator exemption route. There are three possible criteria to use the administrator exemption route. The TIC program meets two of those. In my view, it's a slam dunk. CVB is going to focus on just purity, safety, and they'll establish a withhold time. You know, a normal vaccine, you always have withhold time, next 19 days, whatever, you can't slaughter that animal. So we're really excited because that's a low bar. I mean, right out of the box, we think we've got basically the data to prove the purity and the safety. I think this is the reality. The only reality check for me is that this authority hasn't been used very often. And this may be an opportunity, or may be required at some point. You know, that maybe the commission steps in, the commissioner, Dr. Ellis, to encourage the administrator to approve it, the exemption. And we're still on track for the fall availability of this vaccine. So that's our hope. We couple vaccine with RFIDs, with scratching, and we're going to have what we think is a real proactive kind of new step for the program. The other piece is we're going to work with the owners. You know, we're going to work with them when they're working their cattle. We're going to work every step of the way with all the producers involved. Okay, next thing is ports. That's the second page, okay? And if you just focus on this section right here in the middle, it tells a story. Everyone knows that importations are cyclical, okay? They go up and they go down. We went through a period, 09, 10, 11, and 12, every year back year-to-year increases, 30, 40%. This year, FY 2013, from October 1 today, we're down 53% across our 5 Texas border locations. Some of that is just the normal kind of fluctuation. I'm going to focus on, or kind of drill down on 2 ports, Laredo and Presidio. And I think they tell a couple different stories that you guys need to know about. The first piece is on Laredo. You can see for Laredo this year, they're actually up 1%. So in a world where in our Texas ports we're seeing a 53% decrease, Laredo's up 1%. And that's because of the Columbia Bridge facility. Nuevo Leon has put a lot of pressure on their producers to use that facility. In fact, if you want to ship cattle out of Nuevo Leon and you're a Nuevo Leon producer, you have to use their port. And we're splitting time at this point between the ports, between Columbia Bridge and our facility, that's the temporary facility. And I mean, it's working very well at this point. The Columbia Bridge folks have actually also added 2 barns for exporting horses in the United States. They've got a 40 stall capacity, 20 stalls in each barn. And we're actually crossing horses now for the first time in 3 years. You know, Laredo was traditionally, for the last 20 years, our main border crossing for equines out of Mexico to the United States. And so we finally have a facility back again that they can actually move those horses legally. One other thing on that is 20th of June, I have a meeting set up. Dee is going to attend, and we're going to ask industry groups, regulators, Mexican and USDA in Texas. We're going to talk with Laredo about the future. You know, where we are today, where we go. Presidio. You see, this is Presidio tells a different story. They're down, you know, overall 53% for the 5 ports. Well, if you look at the numbers, Presidio is down 70%. There are a combination of factors for that. Okay, not combination of factors. One is cattle are moving from Presidio farther west to Santa Teresa. They're diverting before they get to Presidio. That's the first thing. Second is overall there are fewer cattle out there. So, you know, I mean, the reality is that we see a drop in numbers. The third piece is there's an inability or a kind of reluctance of the producers there to address the issues of making that facility work. You know, last year we put in a temporary facility in Presidio, and we're at our other facilities we get cattle across at 9:30 in the morning, and we start working cattle. At this facility, we can't get them there until 11:30, 12:30. The facility works great. We can run 300 head an hour through there, but so we're working with the producers to resolve the situation. To that end, we met last week at State Capitol with the state senator and representative, the mayor of the town, all the brokers, and we committed to 2 things. One is we're going to do a reassessment with the State Department of the security risks at Ojinaga. Committed with USDA that we will the permanent solution in Mexico is to inspect cattle in Mexico. We'll do it where it's safe, when it's safe. And so I committed to those guys that we'll relook at it. And we'll see about going back to Ojinaga. The second thing is we're going to try to fix that cattle flow issue. We're going to kind of approach it from two ends. The next actual two graphs I think are interesting, and it gives you the idea of what's happening on this border as far as the shifting. This first page is actually FY12, so it's last year from that October 1st through today, or this period. You can see actually that the blue hatched top line is Santa Teresa, and the line that basically parallels it is Presidio. Presidio is always number 2 port, or number 1 or number 2 port to Santa Teresa, southern border port. You can actually see the next one down is the red line. That's when we shut down Del Rio, and we had to rebuild Del Rio. We flatlined it for a while. So that's last year. Switch to the last page. And you can see what's happened. Santa Teresa, here's Texas, 53%. And you'll see, actually, if you look at the numbers, Santa Teresa's basically, they're the same number they had last year, essentially, at this time. You see what's happened, all the rest of our ports have dropped off. Now, I've talked to guys like David Winters, and I said, David, what's happening here? What can we do differently? He said, well, we're not competing, okay? We're a temporary solution, but at the same time, we don't want to alter the terrain, okay, because of something we're doing beyond what we can do. And, I mean, David says on one hand, he said, Santa Teresa is just really, they're really selling their services. I know the guys in Columbia Bridge are trying to sell their services to you, so maybe we'll see more shifting that direction too. But I just wanted to point that out, that's a reality of today, okay? Right now, we're shifted lots of cattle to Santa Teresa. We all know there are fewer cattle overall in Mexico, but we're seeing that shifting west.
Are these still going into the Panhandle of Santa Teresa?
We were at a meeting. I was at a meeting last week, and there was some talk about, because these cattle are shifting to Santa Teresa, that fewer and fewer are coming to Texas. I don't know if I believe that. We don't have that number. Sometimes they spend a little bit of time, and then they're reconsigned out of there, and we don't know it coming to Texas. But my feeling is that we're not changing the overall availability of cattle for Texas feedlots and backgrounders. I mean, Chairman Morales, you may have a better kind of a sense of that.
Well, it affects South Texas big time. Cattle that move through Santa Teresa are not going to come south.
Right.
They'll go west. I mean, they'll go east and north, but they're not coming south.
I mean, if you look at the numbers, the couple of charts ago, really, if you look at FAR, our southernmost port, and Laredo, they've never been huge ports for us. And they're actually not. They're not off. They're off less than that 50%. There's still cattle that stick there to come into South Texas, but farther west we're shifting. And my sense is that they're circling back and coming back up to the Panhandle, but I don't have numbers on that. Any other questions?
I have a question about the vaccine. You indicate that probably this company that's producing it for you is not going to go to take the extra step to do all the testing to pass FDA and make it available for ranchers and to be able to have access to it down the road. Is that right?
Well, I guess let me just expand on that a little bit. They look at this BM86 technology as kind of like old technology. That antigen they're not as excited about because it's not as effective against MicroPlus, which is the moneymaker worldwide, right? MicroPlus is the one they want. So what they're doing is they're producing a vaccine for us that we think will be valuable for our program, short term, with kind of a low bar, almost no cost to us. What they get in return is a relationship with ARS. ARS has some antigens that they don't have for a tick vaccine, and they're working today on a vaccine they hope will be the next generation's vaccine, much more effective against MicroPlus. Then that's the one that they could take to licensure, and that's the one they sell worldwide, and that's the one we could also use in our program. But that's what's in it to gain for them. They're giving us a vaccine that we know will work and help our program. One of the cool things about this vaccine is that we're seeing more and more instances of resistant ticks. We've had a couple in Webb County just recently. They come across the border, and we hit them with Coumadin, and we check them 10 to 14 days later, and they've got adult ticks on them still. You know, they're maturing, so we're seeing resistant ticks. What we know in the real world is you vaccinate those animals, every one of our, everything else that we use to treat ticks is amplified and much more effective. And so, because those ticks are weaker and more susceptible to our treatments. So we're excited. So in other words, this vaccine we like right now for the near term to get our program up and running. And we're hoping that partnership between ARS and Zoetis leads to something that's a world-class vaccine that, you know, that works for the company, but then also we rotate back in our program.
Yeah, the producers down there in South Texas, a lot of them have been through tick quarantines. I mean, way up from the border, of course, and they're kind of watching this because they're anticipating a vaccine that they're going to have, it's going to be available for their use in the future to offset any future quarantine.
And so that's the deal. And the other thing about this is, you know, the vaccine vision is that permanent barrier. But we get infested pastures. That's gonna be part of our treatment plan. Is even if like, you know, these guys that are right across the road, first thing we do is we're gonna go and vaccinate those animals. We're gonna vaccinate the neighbors. The other piece about this vaccine is breakthrough stuff. 2 loading doses and an annual dose after. So once we get through a 2-dose front end, we'll just revaccinate every year, annual basis. You know, it will work with producers when they're gathering their cattle to time it so we can go in and do our scratching and vaccinating and ear tagging and that kind of stuff. So,
Withholding hadn't been established yet.
no, but the withholding is simply going to be, you stick a vaccine and you've got that adjuvant and you've got the carrier and oil based, or you know, and you just don't want to kill that animal for 18, 19 days, whatever it is. We're not going to have to follow these animals to slaughter. That's the beauty of this.
The Gavac vaccine had a different adjuvant, and it was 3 injection loading doses, and then every 6 months. So this new vaccine is worth the wait because it's less injections for the ranchers, and evidently the adjuvant may be helping with immunity as well. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons isn't here, and Commissioner Jordan ran the meeting this morning. Ken, give us an update?
Yes, I can, right quick. Chairman Morales, we had 2 items that were brought to our attention today in the Budget Subcommittee, and Monday Rufus and Robert Gonzalez presented them as our auditors. And first one was an audit of Region 7 office, and they, as you all know, we go throughout the years here auditing each different office or whatever. They came back extremely good as a whole. Only one thing they recommended doing, and that is reconciling on their fixed assets between the region office and the office here in Austin, and they're working on that. But everything came out real good. No problems in that regard either. The other issue or audit we discussed was performance measures reporting, and that in order to make sure all the information we give out back to the governor's office or for budget and planning, whatever, that we are given, we have internal controls in place, and they did a test on the numbers of the tick program and so forth. All of our internal controls were extremely good, no problems there. They had to do a qualification statement on it, except that they cannot audit the USDA numbers that was given to us. But once we received everything, it was in good order. So good reports on both of those, and both reports were adopted in the Budget Subcommittee.
Any questions? If none, could I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the actions of the Audit Subcommittee meetings as discussed today.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the actions of the Audit Subcommittee. Is there any further discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 8, Dr. Hughes Garza, good morning. She's going to give us a laboratory update.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Here to give you a brief update on our lab system. first item on my report is that we renewed our cooperative agreement with USDA for doing some high-risk pseudorabies testing. Last year was the first year that we were able to get that particular cooperative because we're now part of the National Animal Health Lab Network that allowed us to do that testing. They increased the volume of samples that we're going to be running this year under that cooperative. So we'll have 1,500 samples that we run on swine this year. The next several items, I think kind of the theme of my report and the theme of a lot of what we've been doing in the lab recently is quality, our quality management system, quality assurance. A lot of that stems from our membership in the NALM network now. We, as part of our membership in that network, we have to do a yearly document review where they request a whole bunch of different documents on our operating procedures and things that we submit, and then they have microbiologists in Ames, Iowa, that review all that and say, yeah, okay, you're still doing good, you're still in the network for this year. So we are pleased that they were happy with all of our documents. We haven't gotten the official report yet from their findings, but basically we passed and we got our new certificate for this year. So they will, as a follow-up to that, they routinely do periodic site visits. We've been told to expect one of those later this year. They first said this summer, now they're saying in the fall, but at any rate, they'll send an auditor down to look at our lab. So we'll be prepared for that. I didn't mention it on here. We also had a microbiologist from National Veterinary Services Lab in Ames that came down to visit specifically to talk about our gamma test. Was a really nice opportunity for us to talk with him and kind of compare notes on procedures and things. There's not a lot of labs in the country that run that gamma test for TB in cattle, and it was like I said, it was a nice chance to collaborate. He brought some known samples from infected cattle that they maintain in their biosecure facility in Ames, and so that went really well. Dr. Ellis mentioned on the subject of the National Animal Health Lab Network, I was pleased to get a 2-year appointment to their National Coordinating Council, and that's basically a small group that it's got representation from all the different sized laboratories, so the big member labs and then the smaller labs like us, state veterinarians and USDA that sort of help with the strategic focus of that organization. So I'll be going to my first meeting, first week of June in Ames for that. One of the things that's being discussed is that the NALM basically was established as a way to ensure that our nation has surge capacity for the high consequence diseases like foot and mouth disease, avian influenza. If we were to see one of those diseases in our country, the national labs would probably not have enough capacity to run the volume that we would start seeing as an outbreak went on. And so that was sort of the initial focus of that network. But now they're looking at some of the more programmatic diseases like potentially brucellosis or TB as diseases that they may kind of bring in under that umbrella. So it should be an interesting discussion. As Dr. Ellis mentioned, we are getting our plans in place for consolidation of our labs. Our plan is that we're going to be closing our lab in Fort Worth as effective August 31st. That's, I think, going to allow us to efficiently still deal with the volume of samples that we're going to be getting, but it is sort of a reality of the shrinking slaughter volume that we're seeing, because that was a big portion of what our satellite labs and our Austin lab used to run. Right now, we're still seeing about 100,000 slaughter samples per month, but I think that's, it's been shrinking, and then we're anticipating that it's going to drop some more. So I have met with all the employees in Fort Worth. They've known for a while that USDA was sort of moving this direction with the slaughter surveillance program. So unfortunately for us, it means that we're going to lose some really good employees, but we've talked with them about options for transferring some folks to Austin. We had a couple of vacant positions in Austin that we never refilled when people retired. I think right now it looks like we're going to have one employee that's interested in coming to Austin, and that we'll have a position for her that was we're going to modify, or we're looking at modifying a position that was vacated that'll also allow us to have somebody that really focuses on our quality management system that is important to our non-membership. So, we'll be slowly making the transition and moving samples, having people send their samples to Austin that are currently shipping to Fort Worth over the next couple of months so that we can kind of have things winding down before the end of August. Also in Fort Worth, we have several of us are going to be going up there on Thursday. We have an employee, Twyla Thurston, who's been with the state for 27 years, and she's going to retire this week. So we'll be going up there to have lunch with her and celebrate her retirement. Spend some time with the folks up there, and I just, we really do have some really good employees in Fort Worth, and sad to see a couple of them go, but they're the kind of folks that I know are going to do well at whatever they do. So that concludes my report unless there are questions.
How many were on that total staff in Fort Worth?
Right now there are 4. It's been kind of a shrinking staff. It's kind of the same as in Austin. We've had, when people have left, we just haven't rehired just because we don't have the workload to support it. So with Twyla's retirement, we'd be down to 3.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Now we're going to have emergency management program update. Amanda Bernhardt. Good morning, Amanda.
Good morning, Chairman. How are you?
Fine.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you all for allowing me to share a few highlights of our recent emergency management planning and response activities. And I'll just start off with our response activities. Recently, our personnel were involved in the Fertilizer West plant fire response. They worked with the local animal control officials from West and Waco to do animal needs assessment, locate displaced animals, support sheltering efforts that were there. We did a lot of deflecting groups that wanted to self-deploy. We did some relocating of livestock from the affected area, and then made sure that those local animal responders were incorporated into that local response structure. Make sure they had a voice in the Emergency Operations Center, and we're getting the resources that they need. THC was in the affected area, fully staffed for 4 days overall, but then we had personnel that checked in and represented the agency for a few more days after that until they could have all the animal issues settled down. We did have personnel who responded to the North Texas, Granbury, and Cleburne, Hood and Johnson County tornadoes. They have, our personnel through their work over the years with animal issue committees, those 2 areas had very strong local animal responders and response plans. So we were able to just, again, provide that coordination support piece through the Emergency Operations Center for a few days. One of the things I'm most proud of, and it kind of follows along that vein of local planning and local preparedness, is our Emergency Management Department met recently with state and federal officials to assist in a project called a Regional Resiliency Assessment Program, or RRAP for short, which is a local and industry-driven initiative to develop biosecurity protocols and response procedures for the Panhandle feeder operations in that section of the state. It's our goal to be able to take that template and use it as a planning resource for all of the industries across the state, from poultry to pork to dairy, and let those communities who have those industries in their area have tools that they can use to help support and protect those industries in conjunction with the work that we do. We actually attended the State Emergency Management Conference in late March and had the opportunity to teach 2 workshops while we were there. The first workshop focused on local planning and how communities can better prepare for disasters that might affect the livestock industry within their community. And then the other one focused on our horseback response team. We also set up an expansive display with the help of our communications and PR department that showcased the THC's response capabilities during disasters. It told the story of who THC is, where we came from, and what we do to protect the livestock industry. And it demonstrated to the attendees the importance of animal agriculture overall to the state of Texas. There were at least 3,000 state and local emergency management officials in the state. And so we had a really big audience to be able to reach through. And we had some stiff competitions with our workshops. So our workshops averaged about 50 folks who were attended each one of those. As far as agency preparedness and getting that message out about what THC does, next week we'll be participating in an emergency response exercise and showcase. We're going to go to the airport, Austin Airport. We're going to go through a mobilization order and integration and check-in into the incident command process and system. And then we'll go through setting up our equipment and testing them out. Then after that, our equipment will be on display for various officials. The governor will make a visit, other elected officials. You guys are welcome if y'all are in the area. If you'll let me know, we'll get you the proper information and get you credentialed to get into that event. We would love to have y'all come visit. You may see us actually on the news. Last year there was a great deal of media looking at the different agencies and what they had to showcase. So if y'all happen to see us, y'all are forewarned. And Bonnie will be providing information on our social media avenues as far as what's going on while we're there at that particular exercise. Hurricane season preparedness. As I close out, we've been really busy getting ready for hurricane season. This year they're forecasting 9 named storms, 18 tropical systems. We'll see how right they are. If anybody, I probably will get in trouble if I say if anybody wants to make a bet. I kind of hope we do have something that'll break the drought that's covering the most of the state, even though as emergency management coordinator, that'll make my life miserable. We had our first round of the horseback response training completed, so both sides of that team have been trained, and we're going forward with plans to better credential them, provide them some additional training, integrate them into more of the state's response structure. And updates are being made to the state animal response team plan. That's the plan that lines out how all agriculture agencies respond to animal issues in a disaster. And a big part of that, and I'd like to thank our industry partners, they're members of this animal response team and provide input into this plan. And we'll go forward over the next few weeks to add some updates to that. What they'll be looking at in a few days is a more streamlined plan that the Texas Division of Emergency Management has requested that we organize our plan in that way, but we'll still have all the feedback and input from those industry partners in that plan. So if you don't have any questions, that concludes my report.
Any questions? Amanda, thank you very much. Good work.
Thank you all very much.
Mr. Stephen Luna will give us administration budget status report. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. I don't know if it's an honor to talk to y'all, and I don't know, hope I don't bore y'all too much talking about numbers. I'll try to keep it simple. Currently, in y'all's folder, y'all have a copy of the current budget. The Animal Health Commission has been conservative in its expenditures over fiscal year 12 and 13 due to uncertainty. It wasn't really until the comptroller released its biennial revenue estimate in January that we started to be able to breathe easier. So knowing that, like Dr. Ellis said, we will have funding to help start to rebuild the program, start to refill positions. At the end of each biennium, every agency, any monies they have left over, they have to give back to the state, and that's regardless of whatever agency they're for. We are anticipating to expend all of our budgets, so we won't be required to give any money back. Regarding 14-year, we do not have numbers yet for 14-year. The Senate Bill 1 has not yet been approved on the floor at the legislature. On the next page, it's regarding the fees that we have collected, and right now we're just under 75% of the year. All THC authorized fees have been implemented. This fee revenue currently is being used for use, maintenance, and repair of state-issued vehicles for field employees. And we will have to readjust estimates on fee revenues because this is the first year we've had where we had a full year to analyze how much we're looking at on an annual basis. Currently,
There are 128.5 FTEs, and we have a agency cap of 147.5. And that's all I have. Do y'all have any questions regarding the budget or the fee revenue that we have?
Any questions? Thank you, Stephen. Larissa is going to give us updates on item 11 and 12. Oh, I'm very sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the administration budget status report as discussed today.
I'll second.
Second. Been moved and second. We approve the administration budget status. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning and welcome. And we're proud of you and your accomplishments and hope you well in your new position.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. This is my first time to be before you, and I bring to you contracts, purchases, and leases. Between $5,000 and $10,000 is just for your information. And then beginning on page 4 are the 10 purchases, contracts, and/or leases that exceed the $10,000 threshold. Specifically, I'd like to bring to your attention 2 purchases. The first is on page 10, the 6 2013 Chevy 3/4 ton crew cab pickup trucks that we have purchased, and the accessories for those trucks that were on page 4 for $12,788.70. In March, Dr. Ellis contacted Chairman Morales to get approval to actually go ahead with that process of purchasing those trucks, because I think, as it was mentioned to you before, there is a law that says that we cannot expend more than 1/3 of our budget or our purchases in the last quarter of the year. And we wanted to make sure that we got that done prior to the end of May, so that was it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. We actually thought that through. Plus, we were facing an increase in the cost of the trucks, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to purchase the 6. So that's why we did that. The accessories were $12,788, and he also gave us that approval prior, and then we're bringing to you for formal approval all of the purchases over $10,000. I'll be happy to entertain any questions you have.
Are there any questions? If none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the contracts and purchases requests for the period from January 1st, 2013 through April 30th, 2013.
Second.
Second motion.
Been moved and seconded. We approve the contracts and purchases request for period January 1 through April 30th. Any further discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. While we're on this subject, could I get a little input in front of the commissioners on what we're kind of thinking, Dee and Larissa, on maybe streamlining this a little bit? Do you have a number in mind on what you would think about proposal? It's on the next one? Perfect.
Next agenda items.
Perfect.
25,000 to answer the question.
25, okay.
So, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the second item I have for your consideration is a request to increase the agency staff's delegated purchasing authority from $10,000 to $25,000. And as background information on that, I think Dr. Ellis mentioned that in 1997 there was an audit by the State Auditor's Office, and they recommended that the Commission approve delegated purchasing authority over $10,000 before we actually expended the funds. Through the state, we actually have authority to expend up to $25,000 on commodities and up to $100,000 on goods and services. But the $10,000 is just a safe measure, safeguard. So as you know, since 1997, things have increased in cost, and we are hoping that we think that if we increase it to $25,000, that will give our staff a sufficient leeway for conducting day-to-day business. without having to come to you for authority to approve.
Is 25,000 going to be enough? You know, like if you
Well-
need to buy a new vehicle.
For capital purchases, that's probably gonna need to be approved anyway. The $25,000 is for
Just
less
day-to-day
than
things
that.
like computer
Like a
equipment.
janitorial contract or the accessories for pickups. Is it enough for most things? It'd be fine. That would help us a lot just to raise it to that.
You need a motion on that?
Yes, we do.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve extending agency authority for delegated purchases not to exceed 25,000.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, we approve the extending agency's authority for delegated purchases not to exceed 25,000. Is there any discussion? Now, would this be immediate,
Yes.
Gene? Okay,
Oh, yeah, no, this is an internal procedure.
okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 13 and 14, we'll have proposals, we'll have adoptions. I do have, before Gene gets started, we've had three that have asked for public comment, Dr. Detmar, Charlie Seal, and Warren. Are all three of these specifically for item 14, Chapter 40 CWD testing requirements for elk? All three? Okay. I was just confused somewhat on whether we talk about this under the CWD on the proposed, but we're going to wait for the elk rule adoption, correct? Okay. Thank you. Gene, go ahead.
All right, morning, Commissioners. As you can see, you got a number of rules before you today. We have a number of proposals that I'll work you through. The first one I bring to you, Sub A, is Chapter 35, brucellosis. Dr. Ellis indicated in his comments earlier today that this is doing two things. The first is to remove the current change of ownership requirement, identification requirement for cattle, with the intent to go forward to propose removal of that, and at a future, the next commission meeting, we'd come back with a new proposal that we would reorient into a new section for identification to make it easier to find and to consolidate other identification requirements found throughout our agency rules. The other rule in this proposal, and this is our entry requirements for brucellosis, which I have not moved to Chapter 51 yet, hope to do in the future because of the complicatedness of the brucellosis requirements. Anyway, in this, we're actually proposing entry requirements for cattle that come from the states of Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana, as they're considered the Great Yellowstone area, surveillance area, and these are brucellosis requirements intended to try to ensure that the risk of transmitting or exposing Texas cattle to brucellosis is mitigated or reduced. And so, I don't know if you have questions on either one.
I think I read that, Dr. Ellis, you said that you have talked to those state veterinarians. They don't feel singled out. They understand what we're doing.
They understand exactly what we're doing without saying. One of them wishes we wouldn't do it. One of them is happy we're doing it because it may help him, and the other one is just whatever. But they'll have the opportunity to provide comments, and obviously, and I've told them all, send some comments in and convince us that there's not a risk of an introduction of brucellosis, because their cattle can move out of there now with one negative test from the Yellowstone area, and they could have licked an aborted elk fetus the day before, comes on a negative test, or it could be a heifer that hadn't calved, and we'll have brucellosis in Texas, and this will just help prevent that. It's not going to prevent it. You know, our post-entry requirements for Mexico cattle are actually 120 to 180 days after entry. This is 60 to 120, and it's just a compromise, so folks don't have to hold them as long under restrictions. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. It will give us some second test assurance that the animals weren't incubating when they came in the state from the Yellowstone area. And I think we're all open-minded, and I want to say again, I ask our epi staff, state and federal epis in the state of Texas, they read through the entire federal reviews, had a number of conference calls, talked with other folks, resources, and this is a prudent measure that they're recommending. I agree with it. It can be amended. You know, it's open for discussion, and we'll certainly want to take a look at any comments that we get. I think probably Montana will send some comments in. The other two, I'm not sure that you'll get the comments. So,
I remember when we approved this, I can't remember, did we have a vaccination clause in there on these cattle coming in? No?
No, the vaccination, well,
Yeah, we
there is
do
a
put it in
vaccination
there.
clause for all, it's not just for these three
Yeah,
states, right,
yeah,
Gene?
it's
There is
for
a
everybody.
vaccination clause in our entry requirements, but I'm gonna let Gene tell you what it is, because I don't have it memorized, because it's actually being moved in this rule.
Well,
We
now
only
we're
had
still-
one, number
we're
one
referencing
left,
it.
and it's still there, but it's not number one, because you can't have a one unless there's a two.
Well, that would,
So
yeah, got
what's
into
it-
order. So basically, non-vaccinated.
It's from non-free states,
Yeah,
that's what it
non-free
is.
states.
Thank you, Andy.
Which means most states do come in without having to vaccinate.
So parts of these states are non-free and parts of these states are free, but with the change in the USDA brucellosis rules pending, that's not as significant. 20 years ago, these states would have probably lost their free status again already, but because USDA is committed to a new relationship and they're moving away from statuses for states, they're not taking any action on these states. And so the status, actually, that may be something we want to look at in the future. Our vaccination requirement is related to a status that's kind of dormant by USDA, if that makes sense. It's not.
We've got
But in this case, they are going to require
They-
though,
they-
that
they
vaccination
should,
for
if
those
they're-
animals 4 to 12 months.
Right. If they're old enough to be vaccinated, they should be. We're not going to do anything with adult vaccination, or if they're babies,
Yeah.
make them be under a permit. But if they're of the right age, we want them to be
We're
vaccinated.
pretty lenient compared to some states.
Absolutely.
Yeah, California, even Louisiana.
Well, the closer you get to Yellowstone, the tougher they get, to be quite honest, because of this exact same risk.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move the proposed amendments to Chapter 35, brucellosis, located in Title 4 of the Administrative Code as discussed today. Further move that the notice of the proposed amendments be published in the Texas Register with a 30-day comment period.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We approve item 13A, Chapter 35, brucellosis. Is there any further discussion? None, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, the next one I bring to you is Chapter 39, scabies. This is Dr. Ellis had indicated to a type of mange. To be honest, in my entire tenure here, I've never had it come up, but evidently we did have an exposure come up earlier in the year that made us recognize that we didn't have all the valid and current treatment forms based on the fact that this was put in place a long time ago, back in the 90s. As such, what we're doing is bringing in and bringing it up to date to recognize some of these treatment options that can be utilized for this this form of skin infection. If you have any questions.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we propose the amendments to Chapter 39 scabies located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today. I further move that notice of the proposed amendments be published in the Texas Register with a 30-day comment period.
Second. Been moved and seconded. We approve item 13B, Chapter 39 scabies. Is there any further discussion? None, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The next one I bring to you is actually a proposal for CWD. It's Chapter 40, and Charlie Warren may want to speak to it. But basically what this I bring to you is some cleanup due to the fact that with the new federal rule coming in, there's been a lot of discussion and debate about some of the standards that they put in place, trying to make them more pragmatic and more realistic to the actual industries that they regulate. There's a couple points that have been made back that this is intended to clean up. The first is just removing an 8-fence foot requirement that we've had in our rule that evidently is referenced in the federal, but it's not actually the federal standard. The federal standard is to prevent egress and ingress of these animals on a piece of property, which then is left up to the type of fence versus requiring it to meet a certain size standard. The second thing, this was a very controversial part of the original federal rules, was they were requiring a complete herd inventory every 3 years, which required hands-on inventory, which the feds have come to recognize that that's not what is pragmatic or practical, and are not looking to have that standard actually enforced for interstate movement purposes. So as such, we've revised our definition and standards for physical inventory just to represent that it's no longer that you have to have the hands-on evaluation of these animals every 3 years. The third and last thing that we were making a change to was for the purposes of positive or exposed herds and stuff too. The federal program requires that any animals, be tested for CWD if they're found to be dead. under our rules, it was 12 months in age and older, which fit the test requirements. However, as Dr. Schwartz and others were talking with them, they wanted anything if you were in an actual positive or exposed herd to actually test these mortalities, and it would go to any age. And so this is evidently something that they wanted to see changed in order to accept our program as meeting federal standards. And so we're bringing forth to make that change to reflect the federal program in regards to those kind of herds. So, and that's that for these three. I don't know if Warren or Charlie have any comments on this.
Okay. If so, they can talk about it when, this is, again, a proposal.
Yeah, this is just a proposal intended to do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we propose an amendment to Chapter 40, chronic wasting disease, located in Title IV of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today. I further move that notice of the proposed amendments be published in the Texas Register for 30-day comment period.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We approve item 13C, Chapter 40, chronic wasting disease. Any further discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The next chapter I bring to you all is Chapter 43, Subchapter C. This deals with TB testing in cervids. Once again, this chapter is being updated in order to bring into account a new TB test that has come online, that's been authorized by the feds in order to allow it to be utilized as TB surveillance in Texas, and also to then cleaning up the chapter to represent some of the changes in terminology and activities of the commission since this chapter was written back in early 2000. Do you have any questions?
We haven't seen a case of TB in deer in Texas yet.
No, we don't believe we have it, but we're going to continue looking for it.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we propose the amendments to Chapter 43, tuberculosis, located in Title IV of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today. I further move that notice of the proposed amendments be published in the Texas Register with a 30-day comment period.
Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. We approve item 13D, Chapter 43, tuberculosis. Any further discussion? None, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Motion carries. Motion carries. Motion carries.
This next and last proposal I bring you is a new Chapter 50. This is for the purposes of fitting our requirements under the federal disease traceability program that they put forth. Under the federal interstate movement requirements, they're required, if you want to be what they call an approved tagging facility, this would allow animals from another state to move into Texas and be tagged in an independent facility. The rules provide for this. They have to be approved by the state. As such, what we've done today is bring forth the federal standards for us to be able to recognize and approve these approved tagging facilities. They could be an approved livestock market. They could be a feedlot. Whoever chooses to want to provide that service to animals that would come in from out of state without being tagged, they would need to be tagged. This would allow us then to recognize and authorize them for their type of activity.
Mr. Chairman, I move that propose a new Chapter 50 located in Title IV of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today. I further move that the notice of the proposed new chapter be published in the Texas Register with a 30-day comment period.
Second motion.
Been moved and seconded. We approve item 13E, Chapter 50, animal disease traceability. Any discussion? None, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That concludes our proposals. We'll move to item 14, adoptions. Gene?
All right, Commissioners, the first thing I bring to you today, and I know we have comments from Charlie and Warren on this, as well as Dr. Ditmar. I'm also going to pass out to you, if I can real quick. These are just some letters that I have received. During the comment period, we only received 2 formal comments, which are addressed. Since then, and the rule has been maintained the same as was proposed to you. That said, there's a number of issues and concerns that continue to get brought forth to ensure that we're able to adequately obtain surveillance with this particular exotic industry and stuff too. And I know that in discussion with, and these letters that I provide you are just recent examples industry groups focus on ensuring that the exotic industry does participate in this. The biggest issue in question is noted in our rule that we will go forward to further work on it. Develop is for inventory verification in order to ensure that people that have these animals do participate in a meaningful way of testing those mortalities in a manner that fits the rule is set up, which is 20% of the actual inventory. I know under the leadership of Commissioner Winters that he is, this summer we will go forward and reconvene our task force for CWD and actually work through this with all the impacted industry groups and associations and send the letters to ensure that we do get a viable program that does work, because I know that this is of importance and of concern to a number of folks in industries as they all look on. And so with this, I may see if, take comments, I guess.
Okay, sure. Let's get started with Warren. Your card was just on top, so.
I saw your eyes.
Get the easy stuff out of the way.
I'm used to being put on the spigot anyway. Thank you, Commission. It's good to be here this morning. I'm going to make mine pretty brief, but I would encourage you to keep an open mind about this and understand that the federal rule's not even settled yet. So this is like trying to teach a baby to walk on a floor full of marbles, and we're going to do the best we can. And I think that I wanted to tell you that I have numerous projects going that involve capture of these species right now, and I've talked to all of these individuals and told them about these programs and how this has to work, and it has to start with paperwork, and the foundation of it will be our transfer permit. It's not going to be perfect, but at least it will set the precedence of where these animals are and how that particular group of animals are being moved at that time. The ranchers and the operations that I'm dealing with are okay with it. I'm here as an observer for the Texas Deer Association, but I'm testifying as a private wildlife biologist at this time. So I would tell you again that understanding that as we move forward and wildlife diseases change, scientifically, that we may have to make some amendments to this. But this difficult transition that we're trying to make right now is the best that we can get our hands on to start with, and the ranchers are okay with this. And as we speak, the ranches in Texas are beginning to diversify more and more with the use of exotics, and are going to continue to. Mexico's coming into play, and other states are coming into play, as you well know. So that's what I wanted to mainly bring to you as a message today, of what I was involved in the field right now, and that we have made a viable effort to set a precedence of what this program is going to do. They're okay with paperwork. They know they have to do it. They don't like it, but they're okay with it. And if we can keep it simple and user-friendly, I think we're going to be okay. And so at this time, I'd like to open it up for questions. Anybody has any questions of me? Pretty easy.
That was easy, wasn't it?
That was easy. That was easy.
Thank you. Appreciate
Okay.
it.
Thank you very much.
Charlie Seal is with the Exotic Wildlife Association. How are you, Charlie?
I'm good, thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, I've sat on this CWD working group, as has several of the individuals in here with Parks and Wildlife, Mitch Lockwood and Dr. Ditmar, Warren, Dickie Winters. We have struggled for the last 2 or 3 years over the issue that we're talking about here today. I also sat on a national working group, and I'm going to correct one thing that Warren said. The federal rule has been settled. It's the standards that we're talking about that have not. And I sat on a committee that is trying to design or redesign these standards. We went from 77 pages of standards down to 55, and if they take the deletions that we have right now, it'll go down to about 30 pages. The problem with these standards is they went way above the rule, and they have basically tied the hands, and it was an eradication program instead of a control program that APHIS had lined out to begin with. So what APHIS has done is given the states a federally unfunded mandate, and it's thrown it right back into the laps of all the states. So this is why this committee, I think, has really struggled with this, on trying to reach a happy balance here. And there is a balance in protecting the state's resources, but at the same time not stifling commerce. And I think that the program that we have come up with although it will be a work in progress, I think it is a good program on ranch-type animals. The animals that we're talking about with the elk, the red deer, and the cyca, they're not like whitetail in a pen. You can't get an exact inventory on these animals because I've got one member that has 10,000 acres and he believes 500 elk plus or minus 100. There's no way to do an accurate inventory, much less reconcile that inventory each year. So we came up, I think, with the best plan, and that was the inventory is at the capture site. That becomes that person's inventory. But the most important thing out of that is the transfer paper, knowing where those animals are identified, where they came from, and where they go. And like Warren said, the ranchers don't like it, but they're okay with it. The thing that they were most distasteful, with them was killing healthy animals. And they did not want to do that. And I think this program alleviates that problem. They will test 20% of their mortalities at the capture site or on their ranch as they find them if they're testable. Is that the best of all worlds? No, it's not. But that's the best we can do in a ranch situation and still keep these industries viable. With that, I'll answer any questions.
I have a question, Charlie. Is anybody in the elk industry harvesting those horns in velvet like they did 10 or 15 years ago?
There is a velvet market, but it's not so much in Texas as it is in the northern states. There's a tremendous velvet market up there. But CWD, when it shut down the international market, killed that.
So nobody in Texas is really doing it?
Not really, not in Texas, not like they used to. No, sir. There may be one or two breeders, but not to any significance.
Any other questions for Charlie? Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Dr. Ditmar?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Bob Ditmar. I'm a private practitioner in Kerrville, Texas, but I'm here today primarily as a livestock and wildlife producer from Busby County. I want to kind of echo what Lee and Warren said. We spent lots of time messing with this. We haven't come to a consensus. It's a work in progress, and it needs to be that. But at some point in time, we're going to have to circle the wagons and get it pulled together. Some producers have done a great job of testing, others have not, and we've had very few tests in elk and red deer over the past 10 years, and it doesn't give us a lot of confidence in having an adequate level of detection. The limited participation in the program has limited our ability to determine an inventory, and not only is that important in CWD, but other diseases, as Dr. Ellis pointed out earlier today. Charlie and Warren said this is a work in progress. It has some flaws. The letters that you got from TWA, QDMA, and the Wildlife Society point out some of those flaws. I would be happy to answer any questions about those. They're pretty much self-explanatory. This rule is not perfect. It does include the new susceptible species, and that's very important. And I think if we can achieve a high level of participation, it will be acceptable. I just ask the Commission to be vigilant and make changes needed in the future, and don't hesitate to make those changes to correct inadequacies that might develop in the future. Yeah. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer, or try to.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have received these 3 letters, one from Deer Quality Management, or Quality Deer Management, Texas chapter of the Wildlife Society, and the Texas Wildlife Association. And I was asked to read one of these letters. I will kind of give a summary of the letter from the Quality Deer Management Association. Just kind of, again, appreciation for what we're doing and trying to move forward with this process, but just listing a couple of concerns that they'd like to see discussed as we evolve with this. One being disease testing compliance. While it's clearly recognized that a few elk breeders have done an exemplary job regarding voluntary and/or mandatory disease testing, Data provided by your agency suggests that they are in the minority. For example, since 2003, only 149 tests have been conducted, representing 15 of 85 herds. And other concerns of herd inventories, Warren made a good point, and Charlie made a good point. It's how hard it is to do in that ranch environment. So there's just a couple other concerns, inventories, and then maybe some discussion in the further time for shooter bulls. So I just wanted to have that comment brought, that person could not be here today.
I have a question.
Yeah, Warren, would you like to respond?
Just one more comment, and thank you for correcting me on all this stuff kind of flows together, but it is the standard. But I want to give you an example. I feel sometimes that where we fail is not really letting you know what the on-ground people are doing and thinking. And I was on a ranch the other day that has red deer, probably Sika, and I did it properly because he told me coming in, do what you need to do for us. I need to eliminate my animals, but I truly don't know what I have on this ranch. Please convey my message. Don't put me in the position of having to tell somebody something that I don't know. And I think that's a really important message for y'all. They want to inventory this as it moves, and as Dr. Detmeyer and all of us have talked about on this working group, please keep an open mind that we're busting our rear ends to try to come up with the right thing to keep this industry running. We have a lot of people that are engaged in commerce in Texas right now that are diversing their ranching operations, and they want to do the right thing, and we need to keep it user-friendly with disease protocol and stuff. And I just wanted to make that last statement.
Thank you, Warren.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say one thing on this, and for once, this will be real quick. A sincere and heartfelt thanks to the other regulatory agencies as well as the producers that have worked so diligently on this. There is concern, justifiable, but please understand, as has been stated, this is a work in progress. The inventory will become more accurate as the program matures. We're trying to bring whole cloth out of ether right now until these producers have an inducement and a reason to actually start keeping track. They're not going to know, and they cannot know at this time. As the program matures, the accuracy will increase, and the fears should be alleviated. I thank everyone that's worked on this. I thank all of the commissioners for giving this serious consideration. If we take this step, we can move forward in a positive manner. If we do not take this step at this time, we're going to lose what ground we've made. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the repeal of and amendments to Chapter 40, Chronic Wasting Disease, located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 14A, Chapter 40, Chronic Wasting Disease. Any further discussion?
Ernie, I got one little question to ask Miss Lockwood back there.
Okay.
I got a call a couple of weeks ago from a rancher friend of mine that has a ranch next to Guadalupe Park, Guadalupe Peak, and also New Mexico, and he's got a pretty sizable herd of elk, native elk, running on his ranch, and he wants to know what the protocol is going to be if he wants to hunt them next year and what needs to happen. I wasn't able to answer that question.
Mitch?
Well, it really is under ours. I mean, if he's gonna hunt them under there, I guess it's just a general hunting license.
Well, this is
In Guadalupe Mountains.
yeah, he's right next to Guadalupe Mountains. And
He's in the restricted zone, which means he can't transport them live off there, nor,
No, he just wants to hunt.
Hunt them, yeah.
Now, he's probably going to have to get them CWD tested.
Yes, sir. Mitch Lockwood, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, for the record. To hunt elk, he would have to have a hunting license, but as per Texas Animal Health Commission rules, if he plans to move that harvested animal outside of a containment or high-risk zone, then he would have to have the animal tested for chronic wasting disease
Take it off the ranch,
prior to transporting it out of the zone.
out of the zone.
CWD zone, high-risk zone or containment zone in that
So
case.
there's actually no season. He just has to have a hunting license.
There is no season on elk, and the legislation that Mary briefed you on earlier today would not change that either. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Any other discussion? None, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item B,
Second rule I bring you up for adoption is Chapter 41, fever ticks. This is, it was proposed the last meeting, and there was no comments. Basically, what it was is Dr. Ellis had indicated earlier to give the agency and the USDA better handle on what's in the zone requires that these animals will be gathered and presented annually and ID'd so that we can maintain an active inventory of what's in the zone and ensure that any treatment and dipping is being taken care of naturally. So, with that, if you have any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the amendments to Chapter 41, fever ticks located in Title IV of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today.
it's been moved and seconded that we approve item 14B, Chapter 41, fever ticks. Is there any further discussion? None, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Commissioners, the last rule I bring you for adoption today is regarding Chapter 55, swine. And this is specifically regarding pseudo-rabies, and it was basically changing test protocols for animals that were restricted to quarantine in order to fit the current standards nationally, and that by removing 2 consecutive tests and taking it down to 1 test to be conducted within a 30-day time frame in order to release animals that have been exposed to pseudo-rabies. Questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt amendments to Chapter 55 swine located in Title IV of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We approve item 14C, Chapter 55 swine. Any discussion? None, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I do have one quick thing, real quick, and I
Yes.
apologize for my manners because I forgot to introduce, I do have a new employee too that works for me, and that is Bob Young. Where is Bob? Bob actually comes to us from Area 1 office, but he's our new investigator. Cal Morgan, who'd been the previous one, had left and gone and worked with the Sheriff's Department, and so I've worked with Bob a number of years. Any of you that know him know he does a great job on behalf of the agency. Very happy to have him, not only here, but all the work he does for the agency, and I did want to acknowledge him, and I apologize for not having done it in a more timely manner.
Well, thank you for doing so, and welcome. We have no other public comment in front of me at this time, so we'll move to item, I'm sorry?
Sure.
Yes.
As you know, Ralph Simmons is not here today. Did y'all have a report to give earlier on his absence?
No. No, please fill us in.
His wife, as you recall, had open heart surgery in November of last year, and about a month ago started having some complications due to it. Yesterday, they did a procedure and they were able to do it arthroscopically instead of the full-blown heart surgery. And as of about 7:30 last night, she was doing well. The surgery went well. That's all the doctor told him. They were going to knock her out all night, told him to go get a room, come back this morning. They would review how everything went last night, but everything was looking good.
Thank you very, very much for that update. We'll go through the same process of setting a date for our meeting. We'll look at September. We want to have time this summer for the stakeholders for the ID rule. We want to meet with that small group again that are directly affected and move forward to have something hopefully by a September meeting for a proposal. Let me look. Well, I hope I never lose this thing.
We're all in trouble, Ernie.
Man, September looks good. So are we thinking early September, early September?
Either the 10th For the 24th, the 17th, Carol's in Hawaii, so I don't want to have a meeting.
Carol, we'll have it in Hawaii.
There you go.
Agency's got plenty of
Yeah.
all go over.
Hey, that's where we can
Hey, we can check on those bucket bulls. Yeah, check on those bulls and spend the extra money.
Actually, the 10th would be my recommendation, because
Okay.
she's gone the week before, and she comes back on Monday, the meeting's on Tuesday, we're still kind of messed up. So
Well,
I recommend-
why don't we set then the next date for the 387th meeting for Tuesday, September the 10th?
Great.
Okay, that was easy, and with that, I will call this meeting adjourned. Again, thank you, everybody, for being here.